There we are. We are live. Welcome to the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I hope you guys are doing all right. My name is Jamal Thomas. I want to check this one more time before we go. There we are. There we are. Much better. I hope you guys are doing all right. This is Jamal Thomas Morning Show. I call it the best damn morning show covering news, politics, domestic, international, all that good stuff. We have a damn good show for you today, a full show for you today. We have Alex Krainer. He is going to be here at 7:15. We have Esteban Esteban Curillo. He is going to be here at 8:30. At 8 o'clock, we have a new guest named Johnny Miller. Now, Johnny Miller is a British correspondent who is, of all places, in Moscow. And he has been covering the war in Donbass, which is just fascinating. Shout out to Arno. He put me in contact with him. So that should be a really good and interesting interview, to put it mildly. Yeah, this should be a really good, interesting interview, to put it mildly. On top of that, we have Sarah Bils. And as I said, Esteban Curillo, he will be here at 8:30. Sarah should be here around 9:30. We'll have a good show. I hope you guys are doing good this Friday. We are going into the weekend, and there's a lot of news, to put it mildly. I don't know what they're doing upstairs. I assume they still have construction, so forgive me if there's any kind of intrusion or noise, bumps, or anything like that. It has been taking place all morning. But nevertheless, let's get into the show. Shout out to the chat, by the way. I see a lot of people are here already. Jen Choi, shout out to you. Alexander Black, Navy Vet, Raphael Lagonde. I'm going to take a risk. I'm going to risk it all and go with Lagonde. Haggard in chat, or Haggard in chat. Thank you all for being here. As I say, you guys could be anywhere this morning. You guys chose to be here under this voice, and I appreciate you guys for being here. Last night, I did a video where I pointed out that, and I'll start here since I think this was the title picture that I have on the show, a sinister turn in the conversation taking place with Iran, between U.S.-Iran talks. Now, I'm not going to rehash that video. That video is up. Anybody can go and watch it. I think I laid it out pretty well, my point of view, and the reason why I had that particular point of view. I will say, I've been cynical with those talks, even though I was also hopeful that my cynicism was wrong. Meaning, I guess within that cynicism was a little budding of optimism, like the little heart of the Grinch that grew 4 feet or grew 4 sizes beyond what it was. They send Witkoff, and Witkoff had been seen as a realist, in quotes, right? And all of the hawks, neocon, and whack job Zionists that Donald Trump had put in his administration had been effectively sidelined. In fact, the entire State Department seemed to be sidelined, with Witkoff being a one-man band, going to Oman, going to Israel, going to Rome, going back to Russia, going back to Russia, going back to Russia, going back to Oman. Meaning he was all over the place. And he was effectively doing everything. He was effectively doing everything and doing it effectively all on his own. And as I pointed out, when Witkoff came out sounding very similar to the Iranian foreign minister, Argachi, I keep saying that name. I hope I'm getting the name right. I may be butchering that name. He was attacked for it. But Witkoff had been attacked the entire way through, even in his negotiations with Russia. So last night, Donald Trump goes bananas, effectively says he is placing an embargo on any country that is accepting oil from Iran, which is just fascinating, right? China's going to tell you to F off. There's going to be that. So good luck with that. And I'm not even sure if the other countries who accept oil from Iran is even going to accept it, but whatever. You get Hegseth sending out a drunken tweet saying this, that he is planning to go to war with Iran. No, seriously. Message to Iran: we see your lethal support for the Houthis. We know exactly what you're doing. You know very well what the U.S. military is capable of, and you were warned. You were warned. You're warned. You will pay the consequence at the time and place of our choosing. Okay. This tweet is a bit rich on so many levels. This tweet is going out because the US couldn't pacify the Houthis. They couldn't beat the Houthis. They were getting their ass kicked by the Houthis, so much so that the Brits had to come and effectively assist the US in bombing and murdering civilians, as well as with the US murdering and bombing civilians. With the Houthis knocking the drones out of the sky, firing missiles hypersonic into Iran, firing drones and missiles at US ships, I believe it's USS Truman, meaning you couldn't even pacify the Houthis. And in your tweet, you're putting in, you know what the US military is capable of. Well, apparently it's not capable of pacifying the Houthis. How about that? But I want you to notice whose name is up here. Steve Witkoff reposted. The Realist reposted this alcoholics television announcer that ended up being head of the Pentagon's tweet. Ain't that just special? Ain't that special? One of the other items associated with this, Reuters, this line, however, a source familiar with talks postponed at some indefinite date. We have no idea when. However, a source familiar with the matter told Reuters that the United States had never confirmed its participation in the fourth round of talks in Rome. The source said that the timing and the venue of the next round of talks have yet to be confirmed, but are expected at some point in the near future. Earlier on Thursday, Iran accused the United States of, quote, contradictory behavior and provocative statements, unquote. You know, like, we're going to attack you at the time of our choosing. Provocative statements like that. And they seem to be confused by the whole thing. And as I pointed out last night, it's not confusing at all if the entire point of view was to use Witkoff as a stalking horse for an attack. You send Witkoff out, you act like you're in real negotiations, and then at some point you blow up the negotiations. Well, we did everything we could. And if indeed you take a maximalist demand that Iran is never going to accept because Iran told you they were never going to accept it from the beginning, then you have your pretext to back away. This was exactly the same thing of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, where they sent Scott Ritter to pretend as if they're looking and, trying to prevent a war. When really, when Ritter found out, oh my God, they're trying to use me to initiate a war. Something very similar, right? They sent Witkoff. He's supposed to be in negotiations. Then all of a sudden, negotiations blow up. And now the pretext is set for an attack on Iran. They don't even know when they're having negotiations again. Donald Trump is screaming about secondary sanctions, and drunken Hegseth is screaming about attacking Iran without an act of Congress and apparently by himself. It's astonishing. So that is where the talks are with Iran. What's interesting is, if you remember, when the US pulled out of the talks with Iran the first time around, and Iran stuck with the negotiation or stuck with the JCPOA for an entire year with this notion of a legalistic viewpoint that, okay, the US pulled out, we will stick with these, and we would go with the flow for a year under a legalistic point of view of staying with them. Meaning, no, we're not going to stay with every provision because the US pulled out. However, we will attend to the deal and we will talk about this in legalistic terms. All right. So lead negotiator comes out and says this. Together with Omani and US interlocutors, we have decided to postpone the fourth round of talks for logistical and technical reasons. On Iran's part, there's no change of our determination to secure a negotiated solution. In fact, we are more determined than ever to achieve a just and balanced deal, guaranteeing the end of sanctions and creating confidence that Iran's nuclear program will forever remain peaceful while ensuring that Iranian rights are fully respected. Isn't that interesting? Because again, when I reported the story yesterday, Reuters says a source familiar with the matter told Reuters that the United States had never even confirmed participation in the fourth round of talks. It sounds like what Iran is doing is setting up a, what is the word I want to use? A face-saving mechanism. A face-saving mechanism with the thought and the hope that the U.S. will come back to the table for negotiations and leaving the door open for them to do so in a face-saving way. That is interesting. That is super interesting. So there's that. That news is taking place. As somebody pointed out in the chat, Israel bombed a flotilla. There's that. They also bombed near the presidential palace in Syria. Now, I suspect this has a lot to do with the issue of the Druze, where, of course, there's been ethnic cleansing in Syria, basically, the murdering. And the West has been hiding this because the West backed the jihadist terrorists that effectively took over Syria. And so there's been this kind of blackout of what has been taking place in Syria, the door-to-door murders, the door-to-door killings that the jihadists that have been pulling off in this kind of ethnic cleansing. Israel has taken issue with the attacks on the Druze and is threatened, I would imagine, Jelani, hence the bombing near the presidential palace. There's that. The other big news is Mike Waltz is out. Mike Waltz, I believe this took place at like 8 o'clock in the morning on Thursday, came out. This is funny to me for so many reasons. But Waltz, National Security Advisor for Trump.
Well, you heard Secretary Hegseth that Iran needs to wake up. Iran needs to get the message that it can be a responsible country, that the president of the United States wants peace. He's ready to make a deal, and that it cannot have a nuclear weapon. Not only can it have
now, by the U.S.'s own security investigation, I guess, intelligence, they're not trying to get a weapon. They have not ever been trying to get a weapon, and they don't have a weapon. So what he's saying here is ludicrous. 30 minutes later, he was out of a job. 30 minutes later, he was out of a job. He was fired. He is no longer working for the Trump administration. He is out on his ear. My guest this year, and I want to bring in my guest. I am eager to talk to him today, especially on some of the news that came down with the AFD. I am joined with Alex Krainer. Alex Krainer is founder of Krainer Analytics and creator of iSystem Trend Following. He has worked as a market analyst, researcher, trader, hedge fund manager since 1996. He has authored several books, including Mastering Uncertainty in Commodities Trading, The Grand Deception, Alex Krainer's Trend Following Bible, and I am glad to have him. How you doing, Alex? You doing okay today?
Doing well. Thank you, Jamal. Thank you for the invite, and greeting to your viewers and listeners.
Oh, man, thank you for joining me. Something happened this morning that I really want to get your take on, and it has to do with, where's the clip? Effectively, the AFD, right here. Germany has decided that the AFD is an extremist organization. Their domestic intelligence agency has decided this, and this is going to apparently allow additional scrutiny on the AFD. Now, this is fascinating to me because this puts me in the mind of the gentleman who was on television in Europe that pointed out we have tools that keeps various, let's say, political parties from taking power. And if you think of in France, you get the Renaissance, well, that's Macron's party, the National Rally under Marie Le Pen. Marie Le Pen charges were put on her. She was convicted of those charges. She did not have to serve time, but just so happened she was not able to go into politics for 7 years. Marie Le Pen most likely would have won that race. You get Carrillo in Romania, where the courts literally stops the election as it is being run in the second round. Carrillo was most likely going to win it. They eventually detain him. He is not allowed to run. Again, the most popular person who was most likely going to win was not allowed to run. AfD, a second most popular political party in Germany at this point. And I think people need to realize AfD and the National Rally were radioactive, let's say 10 years ago. And because of the way and the politics of Europe, they started to bubble up in popularity, where France had to go through all of these maneuvers to keep them from taking power in France. And of course, them being declared a extremist organization, I would imagine that it's going to have some political impact in regards to their ability to, let's say, get elected in elections. Give me your take on this. I mean, this is not the Europe that I know, or at the very least the Europe I was aware of. This is something else. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, obviously, in Europe, under European Union, there are very, very strong fascistic tendencies. Many of the social and political processes unfolding in Europe today are very reminiscent of what we experienced. Well, our forefathers experienced here in the 1930s, and this is coming from the EU. And obviously, there's a strong pushback from the bottom up, from the ordinary people, and they are demanding change. They are demanding return of sovereignty of individual nation states in Europe, and so there's growing pressures on the EU, which would eventually lead to the bloc's disintegration. And so, obviously, democracy is a problem. So, the Mandarins, the Central Committee Politburo in Brussels, wants to prevent democracy from doing its thing. And so, whoever is populist or right-wing extremist or whatever label they can throw at them, end up getting disenfranchised in whatever way, usually through lawfare. And now lawfare is being wielded against any such political faction. But there's, again, very strong pushback from the people because, nobody wants this war against Russia that they're planning, preparing for, and funding already. It would be an absolute catastrophe for the continent and for the people and for the economies of Europe, and nobody's interested in this. So, we're faced with growing authoritarianism, growing repression, growing censorship, and this is part of the process. AfD at the moment in Germany has about 25% support. So what you're doing is you're disenfranchising 25% of the German voters. That isn't going to stand. You're going to have to do a lot more repression for that to stand. Germany is one of the European powers which, under the current leadership, is gung-ho on war against Russia. To the extent that I heard a story from a man who lives in Germany that there was a recruitment drive by the German military in one of the high schools in a German city. I don't know which one. And when the recruiters came to the school, the students put up a placard that said, "Education, not bombs." Well, they brought the police to disperse the students, and they punished them with 3-week suspension from school. And these are just the beginnings. If this keeps going on, the repression will be more and more heavy-handed. So, we're in trouble here, and the fight for democracy is gathering. We see that in Romania, it seems that they are going to fail. The repression, and that the anti-war faction is in fact going to win. We saw that they lost in Georgia. Georgia is not part of the European Union, but it is one of the nations that has been designated by the Western globalist empire as a flashpoint to drag Russia into a quagmire and destabilize her. They failed there. France and Germany remains to be seen. Italy is drawing farther away from this pro-war faction. In Germany and France, we have now increasing protests against the war. And over the weekend, Marine Le Pen held a speech in Paris in front of a very large crowd. And you saw a lot of French flags being waved, not a single EU flag was in sight. And then that speech was followed by large protests in many French cities against the war, where people were saying that they will not send their children to die for Ukraine. So, you know, the ghosts of the past are coming alive. The awareness of where all this is taking us is growing, and the people are not having it. Now, will it be possible to turn this around and to engineer somehow people's consent for war, or at least, you know, passive acquiescence? Remains to be seen. But, you know, given what we've seen in Ukraine, I think that the pushback is very strong and very real. And I remain cautiously optimistic, because unlike in the run-up to World War I and in the run-up to World War II, the new element in this whole equation are the social media and the internet, which we didn't have before. And in spite of the fact that the conventional corporate media are pushing their own narrative, they no longer have control over the narrative, because most people now get their information online and through the social media. So, you know, that inevitably changes the equation, but, you know, it remains to be seen how everything plays out.
Do you think this heavy-handedness, you pointed out that you believe this is going to create the disintegration of the European Union, that this, I mean, obviously the public can see what is taking place. I mean, I don't think when you cancel an election, when Gorgetsku is winning that election, and you claim Russian TikTok ads was the reason for his popularity. I remember when that first came out, I thought to myself, okay, this is nonsense. This is something similar that they tried to say here, that Twitter ads and Facebook ads were the reason that Hillary Clinton lost to Donald Trump, and Trump was working with the Russians. Hillary Clinton spent $1.5 billion in that race. She spent millions of dollars in social media ads, and they tried to argue that $56,000 in ads, half of which took place after the election, was the reason she lost. And so when I saw it, I was like, okay, this is nonsense. And in their own investigation, they said it was nonsense. It ended up being something that came from one of the liberal parties. That in no way stopped them from still preventing Carrillo Gorgetsku from running in that race. Do you really see this as a disintegration of the European Union, like a slow motion breaking away, where many of these states are going to say, this is undemocratic, it's bureaucratic, not democratic, and we need to get back to basics?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And, you know, the people are no longer buying it. You know, the people are just not buying it. You know, you saw that in Romania, it's a mess. And the name of the candidate who's winning now in Georgia is in Romania. It slips my mind, but he's basically, it seems to me that he's almost a stand-in for Carrillo Georgescu, and if he wins, which it looks like he will, then, you know, again, the popular faction won and the globalist faction lost. But the struggle will continue, and I don't know where it goes. But I think that there are the anti-war forces are gathering, and they're gaining credibility, while the pro-war forces are a very narrow margin, a very narrow segment of the society, in the military industrial complex, in the banking cartels, and the politicians that they sponsor, except that most of those politicians are, at least at the EU level, they're unelected, they're not elected, they're just bureaucrats, and by the day the thing looks more and more like the Soviet Union, only worse, because these people are completely insane. It doesn't even, it's so incoherent that I don't know if anybody gives them any credibility anymore. And it's not just, it's not just war against Russia. It's all these insane net zero policies where they are, they want to rearm, but they're at the same time, they've destroyed their energy sector. England just shut down its very last blast furnace. It's now the only G7 country without a steel industry, yet they want to go to war against Russia. How are you going to produce armaments if you don't have any steel? How are you going to run steel, even if you had steel furnaces? How are you going to run them if your electricity is and your energy costs are the highest in the world? And then on top of that, they decide, hey, a great idea would be to start this program of dimming the sun. So you've invested hundreds of billions into solar panels, and now you're going to dim the sun. They are waging war against farmers, against food production. So, at the very same time as they pretend that they want to go and fight Russia, they're waging war, almost unlimited war, against their own people on every front. Healthcare, employment, small and medium-sized businesses are being culled left and right. Small local regional banks are being culled and destroyed and absorbed into the large banking systems. It's like it's like there isn't a strategy. It's a list of desires. But as far as strategy goes, it's completely incoherent. It's completely insane, and I think it will fail. But the question remains how much damage they're going to wreak on the continent before it all finally dies.
Do you think that Europe seems to be gearing up for war? Hegseth goes over to Europe. He makes a speech where he effectively says, we effectively want to leave. We want to pivot to China. We want to feed you to the Russians. I'm being hyperbolic, but that is effectively what he says. We want you to build up your militaries, spend 5%. If you need to cut your healthcare, cut your services, then that's what you need to do. And you have, as you pointed out, Germany seems to be all on board for this. UK seems to be all on board for this. France seems to be on board. Mind you, they couldn't even put like 25,000 troops in the Ukraine, and 25,000 is maybe a month at the most of dead soldiers. Like, to give the scale of that conflict in comparison to what Europe can effectively do. Do you see them rearming over the next 10, 15 years? Do they even have the capability of doing it, considering the debt that Europe is in, that those governments are in? And as you point out, the disgruntled nature of the populations in those countries.
So you're talking about Europe, whether Europe is capable of rearming. Well, yes, they're capable of rearming, but probably nowhere near the requirement to be able to win a war against Russia. Europe has been dependent on the United States for decades now, basically in a subordinate status. And there have been movements for decades in Europe of various leaders and politicians who thought, maybe this dependency is a liability. Maybe that's making us vulnerable. Maybe we need to defend it. Maybe we need to develop our own approach to defense and our own, European troops. I think there was even a name to it. I think Eurocorps or something like this. But this was very, very strongly discouraged by the United States, and basically it died. So we remained We remain dependent on the United States and on American armaments and on American, logistical systems and technologies, even very basic stuff. And so today, Europe is so far behind from having like an integrated force that's capable of projecting power and waging war on any real scale that I don't know if their deadline for this war, which is 2029, 2030, is gives them nearly enough time to overcome all those challenges. It's things like satellite targeting, logistics, all kinds of components that the Europeans don't have at all, that they would need to redesign and rebuild almost from scratch to fill up those gaps. But again, the European system, like in most Western nations, it all depends on private for-profit corporations. The military-industrial complex are private for-profit corporations. They're not part of some kind of a state-level, purpose-driven concern in the industry that then responds to the actual needs formulated by the government or by the military. This is all, let's pile in these wonder weapons, whatever we can come up with. And, they're obviously going to be extremely expensive to build. And I wouldn't put much faith into the whole thing. Just to give you a basic example, one of the deadliest tools of war is the artillery, right? It's boring, it's unsexy, it's not especially high tech, but it accounts for about 85% of casualties on the enemy side, right? NATO uses 155 millimeter shells. The Russians use 152 millimeter shells. So slightly smaller caliber, but basically the same thing. Russia produces 152 millimeter shells at a cost of about $500 a piece. NATO countries produce those 155 millimeter shells at about $8,000 a piece. It's 16 times more expensive. So, where do you go with that? You're at such a massive disadvantage that the whole thing doesn't make any sense at all. I think it's all born out of panic, and that panic is that they are, after 500 years, losing their hegemony. They had their hegemony, their whole advantage and privilege in the world is based on that hegemony, and now it's being lost irretrievably. We had a whole series of these politicians and NATO generals pretty much state this explicitly, that if we lose in Ukraine, we've lost the world for generations. And Boris Johnson, I think probably under the influence, filmed himself on TikTok saying that if we lose in Ukraine, it will be the end of Western hegemony. That's pretty much on record now. And so this is what they're fighting for. This is not for Ukraine's democracy, freedom, human rights, any of that. It's about hegemony. And hegemony ultimately has an economic payoff. It's not a benevolent thing. It's the ability for European financial centers to plunder the rest of the world unmolested infinitely. And this is now coming to an end. And so that's the panic, and that's where this insane drive for war is coming from.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I have to hit the mineral deal with you. I mean, you're an economist. You've been doing this since, at the very least, 1996. Give me your take on that. I mean, Donald Trump said he's going to end the war in 24 hours. And I don't think anybody believed it. We are 100 days in. At this point, in fact, we're beyond 100 days. And he signs a mineral deal that gets him more ensconced in Ukraine, not less, which on some way implies a breakdown of the negotiations, if you want to call it that were taking place between the United States and Russia. I mean, after all, the mineral deal effectively allows them to get stuff, weapons. In fact, he just released $50 million. Again, it's not a huge amount of money, but it's the fact that he released it at all, while he is also saying that he wants to somehow come to some kind of deal and some kind of terms in the war. I think Trump doesn't quite get that the loser doesn't get to dictate terms, and he can't eat crow, meaning he keeps trying to say this is Joe Biden's war, missing the fact that it was America that was fighting this war, not Joe Biden by himself. Give me a take on the mineral deal, though. I mean, is this as bad for Ukraine as some people are saying it is? I mean, it's supposed to go on for perpetuity. It's 50-50, supposedly. It's not a mineral deal. It's effectively everything that comes out of the ground: oil, gas, minerals like copper, rare earth, etc. But give me your take on it.
This whole mineral deal is such a boondoggle that I have a hard time with it. You know, I can't buy the official narrative even at all. There's something else going on, you know. My understanding, and I think we don't have the full details yet. I think the whole deal has not been made public yet. We have some information about it, but one of the things that I understood is that the deal doesn't include U.S. security guarantee. So the United States, Trump got that deal, but without pledging security guarantee for Kiev. So what does that mean? It means that ultimately this deal might be at the mercy of the Russians. You know, so there is the possibility that maybe in the backroom discussions, the Russians said, "Fine, look, we're going to honor this deal. You make that deal with Zelensky, we're going to honor it." But already the fact that Trump signed this deal with Zelensky is very highly problematic, because Zelensky is not legitimately the president of Ukraine anymore since last May. And even though the Verkhovna Rada in Kiev voted on a decree to extend Zelensky's presidential mandate, that is still unconstitutional, because the Ukraine's constitution is very clear on this point, that the presidential mandate is 5 years, not a day longer. Elections cannot be delayed for any reason. War, emergency, whatever it is, that's in the constitution. So whatever the lawmakers voted on under pressure, because they had to vote twice on it. First time they voted wrong, and they didn't extend the presidential mandate until Boris Johnson once more landed in Kiev, and then I expect that somehow pressure was exerted on the naysayers, and then they voted it. But it's still an unconstitutional decree. So what that implies is that if some future government in Kiev doesn't want to honor the deal, they would be legally justified to tear it up and to say, "You signed this with a private citizen. He was not legitimately the president of Ukraine, so therefore your deal is null and void as far as we're concerned." This is the whole aspect of the deal problem, which necessitates U.S. security guarantee, meaning that the United States will defend the regime in Kiev that will honor all these deals with the US, with the UK, with France, whatever they have there. But if the United States decline to provide this security guarantee, that tells me that there must be a backroom deal with the Russians, who probably told Trump, "Fine, look, if you sign some kind of a deal with Ukraine for Ukraine's resources, this and that, mineral rights, we'll honor it. You can have that." So that's, for Russia, that's a way to pacify the situation, to avert the risk of war between the United States and Russia, which could turn into a nuclear Armageddon, and to draw the United States into its orbit as a partner, so that the United States has a stake in having good relations with Russia. So that makes sense to me, but I'm guessing about this. We don't know yet. Just to finish, just before this deal was signed, Trump was saying that the Kiev government is about to collapse, that this is imminent. So he knew this, or at least he thought this. So the fact that he signed this deal tells me again that the deal is something else. There's a whole complexity of elements, moving concerns that are informing all these things. And I think that the real deal is actually between the United States and Russia.
That has crossed my mind, but Donald Trump, when the peace deal, or the peace, quote unquote, peace plan that Donald Trump put forward was never going to be accepted. And I kept thinking to myself, okay, is Donald Trump doing this in order to give license to walk? I couldn't figure out, either he just doesn't fundamentally understand the Russian point of view, that this is existential. The entire population, for the most part, is behind Putin on this. You're on their borders, and they're trying to settle this for the foreseeable future, not create this kind of frozen conflict. But it seems that the U.S. wants a frozen conflict with this notion of coming back to this later with a new president or somebody else that can reinvigorate, after the blood and treasure that Russia put into it. At least that's the way I saw it. Like you said, it's hard to see it because there's no way to know the actual conversations that may be taking place behind the scenes that we're just completely unaware of. But on a shallow level, it seems that he's gotten more ensconced in Ukraine, not less. And it seems that the security guarantees that they are referring to, well, they are none, but it's almost like the business relationship creates an implicit rationale for the U.S. to give them weapons, to give them defensive articles. And to make it even worse, using the deal, it's like if the U.S. gives weapons or sells them something, they can say, okay, now this is folded within the deal, that this is money that the U.S. is effectively putting in because they're putting in weapons. Like, it's very strange in the way that this is being done, especially since none of this stuff really is going to come to fruition for 10 to 15 years, if they're lucky. It's just very strange.
Yes, I entirely agree with you. I mean, everything you said makes complete and total sense, which is why I think there must be a different explanation for everything, because the need for the security is essential unless the Russians already agreed to it, unless the Russians, or maybe Trump, without the Russians, has the plan of saying, hey guys, we got this deal with Ukraine. Now we want you to honor it if we're going to be friends and part. Maybe he wants to kind of impose that on Russia, and the Russians haven't said yes yet. But right. I can see rationale for why the Russians might say yes. Maybe renegotiate some of the deal, maybe put it to a legislative process to give the Ukrainian people a chance to vote on it, to see what their benefit is. What they, Ukrainian people are educated people. They're not how do you call it, native tribes there, and so right. they probably don't want their country to turn into a de facto colony of the United States. So maybe Trump signed himself a deal to give himself a negotiating position to ultimately still extract some benefit for U.S. interests in Ukraine. But that kind of makes sense. The notion that he's now switching from pivoting to Russia to pivoting back to European powers and working together with France and Britain, that doesn't make any sense at all to me, because that would imply that he will ultimately be liable for Ukraine's security, which could be incalculable in terms of costs and risks, then you have to really indefinitely arm Ukraine, supply them with military technology, with troops, with advisors, with trainers, whatever, and you take the risk of a total war against Russia, which both sides would lose, and then everything that you've been negotiating for goes to zero.
Yeah. I heard you in an interview having a conversation. I was in preparation for this. I was looking at some of your other interviews, and I saw you talking about Iran. And last night, all hell broke loose. Like effectively the negotiations fell apart. Iran is trying to put a lipstick on a pig. The foreign minister for Iran comes out, gives a very political face-saving mechanism, saying, tonight with Omani and U.S. interlocutors, we have decided to postpone the fourth round of talks for logistical and technical reasons, blah, 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 blah. We remain wanting to have a deal. We vigorously want one, and we will get back to negotiations when we can. Now, the truth of it is what Reuters put out, where Reuters said this, that a source familiar with the matter told Reuters that the United States had never confirmed participation in a fourth round of talks in Rome, meaning the U.S. had never even come to terms to say, yes, we will be in the next round of talks. Because if you remember, this third round of talks, which were supposed to be technical, didn't necessarily go all that well. The U.S. started to take a maximalist demand on this issue of the Libyan option, getting rid of all enrichment. That was always a red line for Iran. Iran said that was a red line from the very beginning. This is not something we're going to tolerate. We are a sovereign country. We shouldn't even be having these negotiations in the first place. You're threatening us. But in order to avoid a war, we would have these negotiations. We want to get rid of sanctions. Fair enough. You get a drunken tweet by Hegseth, just losing his. I imagine the bottle in his hand as the tweet was being written. Message to Iran: we see your lethal support for the Houthis. We know exactly what you are doing. You know very well that what the U.S. military is capable of, and you were warned. You will pay the consequence, capital letters, at the time and place of our choosing. Okay, it sounds like Hegseth is deciding to go to war all on its own, all by himself, without any act of Congress, without anything. It's just him going to war. And if you notice, Witkoff, supposedly the realist, retweeted that and shared that tweet. Now, Trump comes out and says effectively he's passing an embargo on anybody that accepts oil from Iran, so China and pretty much any other nation, which China is going to say, F off. I can't imagine China is going to accept that. That is pretty astonishing to me. And there's a question. I mean, I got to be honest, I've been somewhat cynical, hopeful, but cynical on these negotiations because I've seen, Wesley Clark pointing out all of these nations were going to get taken out. All of these nations have been taken out. Iran is the last man standing. And to be fair, this is not the same Iran that was there when Donald Trump was in office the first time around. By the same token, Trump has boxed himself in to this rhetoric of we're going to bomb you, we're going to bomb you, we're going to bomb you if we can't get a deal. And it seems that the negotiations have effectively hit a snag. What are your thoughts on this? Do you accept my cynicism as being legit in this, if that makes sense? Or do you think this is gamesmanship? Donald Trump wouldn't be crazy enough to actually attack Iran, especially since it is unpredictable consequences in regards to Iran's capability. They couldn't pacify the Houthis, which is why Hegseth was pissed off. He's humiliated by not being able to pacify the Houthis. There's a report from the New York Times that the U.S. was not able to get air superiority over the Houthis, which is just amazing to me. We spend $1 trillion on our military. What is your take on this? Is this gamesmanship? Is Donald Trump escalating threats with the idea of trying to get something more out of the deal? Or people of policy and the lunatics and whack jobs that Donald Trump have around him may convince him to actually attack? What are your thoughts?
I think that you're right to be skeptical about this, but I would point out two things. First of all, I wouldn't trust Reuters as far as I could throw them. Reuters at this point is it's always been a psyop operation, largely on every issue that matters. When they cite individuals familiar with the events, who are they talking about? I can tell you 100% they never asked me, for example. And so it's a psyop, because the buildup of pressure to take action against Iran is now very fierce and relentless. And to my mind, it explains Trump's war on the Houthis, because when this started on 15th March, I was taken aback. This action against Houthis is so unreasonable, so profoundly stupid and idiotic, that
we lost him. He'll be back, I would imagine. There we are.
Sorry, Jamal, I don't know what happened.
It's okay. You're back. I told her, I said, he will be back.
Tossed me out without even a kind word.
No worries.
Okay, and so it was so idiotic that I thought, okay, so either these people are complete clowns and have no idea what they're doing, or they're doing it for some other reason. And so I was guessing that maybe it was a blow to Europe, because it interrupted the Red Sea commercial traffic, the bulk of which is Europe's trade. But on the other hand, that's not really a fatal blow, because there's another route. They can go around the Cape of Good Hope. Takes longer, it costs more, but trade continues. Okay, so, but then when Pete Hegseth voted against attacking Iran, we saw a very hysterical reaction on the part of the war hawks in the United States against him. So, it tells you that the pressure for war on Iran has now built up to hysterical levels. And so I wonder if them launching a war against Houthis is a way for them to avoid taking the war to Iran, and to appear to be doing something really, really tough and decisive in support of Israel. And so all this rhetoric now seems to be more of the same, only it's gradually escalating. But, given how well they've done against the Taliban in Afghanistan not so long ago, given how well they're doing in their war on Houthis, I can't imagine that they will pull the trigger and go to war against Iran, because it would be catastrophic for the United States. And it would be catastrophic for Israel as well. So if I believe that the administration is well informed and rational about this issue, I think a way to go, what I would try to do if I were in their place, I would say this: look, Israel's a mess. Netanyahu is on his way out one way or another. He's falling apart. Israel is falling apart. If we wait them out, the situation might diffuse itself in time. And so let's go drop bombs somewhere. Let's go talk tough. Let's be all like, do this song and dance for everybody to see, because a lot of these statements are for public consumption. That it's not directed to Iran. Is directed at the domestic war hawks, and hopefully the situation will somehow diffuse itself, or somehow we see that Israel's a mess, and that way maybe we get a chance to effect reforms in Israel and be a helpful partner and ally without having to take the risk of war against Iran, which would be devastating. It would end with thousands of U.S. sailors in the bottom of the sea, in the Persian Gulf or in the Red Sea. It would be, they have between 50 and 60,000 troops in about 20 military bases around the Middle East, all of which are within the reach of Iranian missiles. and Israel would get a barrage of missiles, to use Trump's word, like nobody's ever seen before. And so that's the risk. And what's the upside? A long shot chance of killing the leaders of Iran and getting somehow a regime change there, and then bring the Shah, and then everybody lives happily ever after. Very, very highly unlikely scenario. So you would be choosing something that's unlikely to succeed, along with the certainty that you get a really bloody nose and probably lose your influence in the region for good, irreversibly. So that's how I make sense out of it. I don't know if I'm right. Time will tell. But it seems to me that they are trying to do what they can to avoid going to war against Iran.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, thing is, neocons are ideologues.
Yes.
And, reality doesn't always.
They're ideologues and they're fanatical zealots,
Yeah.
which makes them extremely dangerous, but they're also a very small bunch of people.
Mm-hmm.
They have powerful funding. So this is where you might be able to attack them, but I don't see very many people talking about that aspect of it.
Alex, man, thank you for this. I really do appreciate it. I always enjoy it. We have a great crowd. I think we have 700 people here watching.
Wonderful.
Definitely appreciate you joining us.
Excellent. So thank you to everyone who has joined. Thank you for the invite, and until the next time, Jamarl.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for this. Alex Krainer. He's founder of Krainer Analytics, creator of iSystem Trend Following. He has worked as a market analyst, researcher, trader, and hedge fund manager since 1996. He has authored several books, including Mastering Uncertainty and Commodities Trading, The Grand Deception, and Alex Krainer's Following Trends. Alex, man, thank you for this. You be safe. Have a good one.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. All right. I would like to bring on my guest. He is new to this channel, but I deeply appreciate him joining us. I am fascinated by your story, and I want to get into it. Just so the audience would know, this is Johnny Miller. Johnny Miller is, I don't have a huge bio on you, but I'll read what I have. British journalist based in Moscow, and he spent much of his time of the war reporting from Donbass. That is a weird, that is an interesting thing. Weird is not the right word for it. Interesting. Welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Thanks, Jamal. Good to hear from you. A friend in Moscow said that you wanted to talk to me, so great to speak to you. Where are you? I don't know. You're in America, right?
Yeah, I'm in America. I live in America. I've lived in DC for the last 5 years. I worked at Sputnik for the last 5 years. I've had a channel, my own independent channel for the last 10? Jesus, I'm getting old. So yeah, I've been doing this for a while. How did you end up in Moscow? I have to start there.
Well, because I'm a experienced conflict reporter. I've reported from Libya, Syria, a lot in Africa, Asia, and after the Syrian war, I said to myself, no more war, but because it's very stressful. And but then when the Ukraine war started, I went to report on the war because I'm European first and foremost. I'm proudly British. And war in Europe, I felt I had to do whatever I could, and I'm an experienced war reporter. So I went to Ukraine to start with when the Russians were surrounding Kiev. But every journalist has an angle. I'm very clear about mine. I'm a pro-peace journalist, and I believe peace is in British and European interests. So if you're promoting peace talks in Ukraine, it's very dangerous. When you're on the ground reporter, when you're on the ground reporter, a lot of people don't realize, but on the ground reporting is a whole nother level. So you have to look after your safety. I've been deported from other countries before. So I left Ukraine and then I applied to go to the Russian side. And effectively, I've been here most of the time since. And as my work has grown, the threats have grown. And I recently claimed asylum in Russia because I think I'd be arrested if I returned to Europe because of my reporting.
Wow. Chris Hedges says that, by the way. Chris Hedges was a war reporter at one point, and he talks about how it's a certain type of person who can do it. And like the adrenaline rush is kind of hard to let go. And even when it's like, okay, this is my last war, and you find yourself back. again and again and again.
That is really true. I mean, there's a lot of mercenaries, war reporters as well, that the adrenaline rush is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get back from war, I often get very depressed because it's a different world. The war it is like a movie, and then you get back to peaceful life and nobody cares. Nobody cares about the war really. In London or in Moscow, it's like a war at the edge of the empire. Moscow life just carries on normal. It's
so
hard to
away.
adjust, but Chris Hedges is fantastic journalist.
Give me your take on what you've seen, just as a summary, working in Donbass. I've seen this, I can't think of his name. There's another gentleman who's reporting on the front lines. Well, I guess kind of front lines. They take him out.
Lancaster, American journalist. I don't know.
Yeah, he's a journalist.
There's a kind of handful of Western reporters who've done some amazing work in Donbass.
Yeah.
But in Donbass, one of the reasons I stayed so long, I stayed there for probably a year on and off, is because, I don't know how many of your listeners know how much they know about the war in Ukraine, but, in 2014, the West effectively overthrew the Ukrainian government, put in a pro-Western government. The Russians seized Crimea, and the East rose up, because in the south and the east of the country, people speak Russian, they're very pro-Russian, the majority. So eventually it started a civil war of people in the east, in Donbass, who didn't want anything to do with this new Ukrainian Western government. And so for 8 years, you had an intermittent civil war. But in Donbass there, and obviously being one of the only Western reporters on the Russian side, I felt it was important work. And so the vast majority of people in Donbass on the Russian side, they support Russia. Many of them still call themselves Ukrainian, but because Ukraine has been bombing their cities for so long, they're pro-Russian now, and they want to be part of Russia. And so I thought that was such an important element of the war. My argument from the start, like many, like Jeffrey Sachs, John Mearsheimer, like some great American intellectuals, there's many people around the world who've agreed exactly as what I have, that it's in Ukrainian and Western interest to make peace in Ukraine, and that will mean giving up territory to the Russians. And the vast majority of people in Donbass support Russia. So ethically, there is a deal to be made. So in Donbass, and in Donetsk, Donetsk was the front line. Basically, the front lines were on the edge of the city. So you were living in a war zone the whole time. It's a big city, very beautiful city. There's cities in Russia that are very beautiful. There's cities like any country in Russia that are very ugly. I'm sure the same in America. There's some wonderful cities in America. Some probably you don't want to live in. But Donetsk is a very beautiful city. But the edge is a war zone. So the artillery would come into the center, most days. And it's an incredibly stressful place to live and report from. But that's a summary.
From your point of view, in my coverage of this, it seems, especially after Kursk, where it's like 70,000 of the best soldiers were just killed. I mean, in a fool's errand for all intents and purposes, a propaganda exercise that many in the UK, many in America, thought was fantastic. And I remember being on a radio station pointing out, this is absurd. These people are going to get killed or pushed out or captured, which is effectively what took place. And now it seems that Russia is every day pushing and pushing and pushing on like a 2,000 kilometer front, with Ukraine being incapable of replacing its manpower. Russia having no issue adding more manpower. In fact, from my understanding, building up another military near the Finnish border. What do you think is the rationale for Zelensky to remain on this? I said delusion is a beautiful place, right? The sun is always shining in delusion land. But that seems to be where him and the Europeans are on this, where we're not giving up Crimea. We're not giving up territory that, by the way, voted to leave. We're not giving up this. We don't want to do that. And it's like, but if you keep going, your military will collapse at some point. It is inevitable. What do you think is in his mind that keeps him going?
Yeah, I mean, as did a piece about West Africa recently, and as the great West African leader Thomas Sankara said, he who feeds you controls you. And it's the same in Zelensky's case. He who feeds him controls him. You know, the guy is under threat of his life, and Ukraine would be nothing if it wasn't for NATO's backing. So really, it's NATO countries that are controlling him. And it's interesting now, we're seeing very much that the British are very much I think the British are more in control of him than anybody else. And so, you know, but when this war, when the Russians invaded, or special military operation, whatever you want to call it.
It was an invasion. I mean, I know
the Russians technically it's an invasion, yeah, but the Russians call it a special military operation.
Special military operation,
well.
yeah. They don't like the term invasion, but
okay. Yeah. If it was a real war, there'd be nothing left of Kiev now. So whatever you want to call it, I don't know. People are pro-Russian, pro-Western. I don't really care. You know, call it whatever you want. But the Ukrainians, if it was left up to them, they would have done a peace deal. You know, there was huge peace negotiations in Istanbul. The Israeli prime minister said we are close to a deal. If they were left to themselves, Ukraine would have done a deal and said, okay, look, instead of war, we will give you Donbass, we will give you Crimea, and let's just call it quits. But the British and the Americans said, no, fight, and we will back you and we will win. That's what will be written in the history books. And so Zelensky was really left with no choice. And frankly, if Zelensky had said no, they would have got rid of him. You know, there was a negotiator in those talks, Ukrainian, who was shot dead, killed in Kiev. Who killed him? You know, there's a lot of shady things going on. And so essentially, Zelensky, I have sympathy with him. I have sympathy with most people, to be honest, who are under threat. And because so they don't really control things. There's also the Ukrainian ultra-nationalists. Right. You know, they kill him as well. So really, it's who controls him. What we've seen recently with Trump. You know, I've become a bit of a Trump fan. I'm a leftist myself, but
have you?
Well, just because my life has been 3 years. This war, you know, and trying to promote peace in Europe. And Trump has tried his best to promote peace in Europe, but it looks like he's failing. And the British view is winning. That this vague hope they have of the Russian economy collapsing in the next year, which is based sheerly on wishful thinking. You mentioned Kursk before. Essentially, you've had a continuation of disastrous policies by NATO. The Ukrainian counteroffensive of 2023. I don't know if you remember back that far.
I do. It was laughable. And the promo video for it was a great promo video. I would have loved to see that movie. The offensive did not live up to the promo.
I was in Donetsk at the time, and I don't make many predictions as a journalist. You know, they tend to make fools of everybody. But I made predictions on that and saying it's going to be an absolute disaster. And because I was watching this propaganda from the West and that promo video you're talking about. Yeah. Because I'm on the ground reporter, and other people predicted as well. And I was, you know, the Russian morale is not bad. It's very good. The Russians are very organized. They made a lot of mistakes, but they run their military pretty well, and they're pretty fierce people. So I could see the counteroffensive was going to be a disaster, and it was I thought they'd have more success, to be honest, than they did, but they basically had no success. It was and it's come out now. Even the British press has accepted that it was largely the British who were organizing it. Mm-hmm. And of course, you say the Kursk offensive. The Kursk offensive. The only reason the Kursk offensive, for listeners who don't know, when the Ukrainians effectively tried to invade Russia, which made no sense. The only reason they had initial success inside Russia is because the Russians never expected it, because it was obviously the most stupid, crazy move. Yeah. Why would you ever do that? Yeah. So they had initial success, and now, of course, the Russians are taking them out. But there's been attempt after attempt, because when you're playing a losing game, you get desperate. And the chances of Ukraine winning this war, I mean, maybe in one of the hundreds of parallel universes, they've been able to do it from a sheer coincidence of miracles. But when you're playing a losing game, you get desperate. So you just have these desperate attempts over and over again. And this is what's happening again now with the continuation of war. There's just this vague hope that maybe Russia's economy will collapse in the next year and they'll be able to achieve something. But it's just vague hope.
So they are sacrificing thousands of Ukrainians a week, a day, whatever that number is, on this vague illusion that the Russian economy that is doing better than pretty much every other European economy, and I say that literally, that's going to collapse, as opposed to the European economies that are being deindustrialized because they no longer have access to Russian energy. That is astonishing.
That's exactly it. And you have, there is a deep incompetence in the British military establishment and political establishment, and it is very difficult to understand the reasoning of it, because it's damaging British interests, it's damaging European interests, and the war is not winnable. So why carry it on? And a lot of it is simple kind of groupthink, and people not being able to accept that they were wrong. And of course, when you go into war mode, you silence all critics. So that's why I've had to claim asylum in Russia. I've had such serious death threats, constant phone hacking, smear articles about me. British academics, they will go after them. There's an article recently in Alternative Press about Britain's best Russia expert, who's a wonderful academic who works at a nice English university and is Britain's best expert on Russia. Not some revolutionary guy, just an academic.
Yeah.
And they went after him and tried to make him lose his job, to silence him. In America, you have a bit more freedom because you have the MAGA movement. Even conservative Americans, it's not just the kind of alternative journalist like yourself, Jamal. I don't know if that's the right way to describe you, probably. But also you have many conservatives in the MAGA movement. So you've had more freedom. Tucker Carlson, for example. I don't disagree much with Tucker Carlson. But in Britain, you don't even have that. So they've just gone after everybody to silence them. And so you just have this idea that just doesn't get questioned.
I will tell you that the Biden administration eliminated my network from the airwaves. I effectively lost my job.
Wow.
Working on. So yeah, we have a First Amendment, but there are ways around it, if that makes sense. You are right. Tucker Carlson has been probably one of the most outspoken voices on it.
So you're a Trump fan now?
No, not the least.
But honestly, do you feel, because I speak with her, I'm friends with I can say this, friends with Tara Reid. I don't know if you know Tara Reid, American woman who
I've spoken with her a few times.
So we sit have lunch sometimes in Moscow.
Very cool. Yeah, Tara Reid she's cool.
But we talk about, because she's been really targeted, and so she's a left-wing Democrat, but she likes Trump now just because the idea of your enemy's enemy is your friend, etc. So, but can I ask you, do you feel more free as a journalist doing what you're doing under Biden or Trump?
So it kind of depends on what you're talking about, right? Like Donald Trump has been completely obsequious to Israel, and because he's been that way towards Israel, he's been silencing criticism of Israel. He's been kicking people out of the country. In this case, he's been deporting people who are here for college or education and those type of things. So if you are talking about that, less so. If you're talking about the war, more so, because, but to be fair though, Joe Biden couldn't really get around the First Amendment. He tried to, using like a censorship regime with social media and those type of things. Once Musk bought Twitter, okay, that was over with. But more free, that one's tough. I would say yes, just because Donald Trump, his point of view in this case is, all things being equal, he would like to end the war. But I'm putting it in quotes, because what Donald Trump wants in regards to ending the war, it's nonsense. He doesn't quite get that from the Russian perspective, it's existential. And what they want is to deal with the actual reasons that the war started, the expansion of NATO, NATO in Ukraine, the notion of going after Russian speakers. Like there's a list of things that they effectively want. And in considering that from their point of view, we won this war. Like you guys lost. Like you provoked us. You touched the stove was hot. We won. So you don't get to dictate terms to us. And so you have a president who's completely incapable of eating crow, incapable of looking weak, as opposed to just walking away like Steve Bannon said, walk the F away. And you could say that's Joe Biden's war. I don't want to have anything to do with it. Donald Trump didn't want to be lambasted as it's your fault that Ukraine lost, despite the fact that Ukraine lost because Russia beat it, right? And so he has now ensconced himself even more into this war, even approving $50 million in weapon sales to Ukraine. So the president that was supposed to be ending the war in 24 hours, nobody believed it, whatever, it's hyperbole, is now further involved in this conflict in a way that it seems to have completely broken down any notion of peace negotiations, because what Donald Trump wants is a frozen conflict, something that Russia is not going to accept. Give me a take on that, by the way. I mean, do you agree with that?
I do believe Trump genuinely wanted peace. And even when he talks about thousands of men dying a week, I actually believe that he cares about that. The man is human. I mean, I genuinely, listen, one day he'll care about Europeans dying a week and next day he'll bomb Yemen. Okay, so I get it. But there are differences.
Exactly.
But my point is that I genuinely believe that he is also a human being and he does actually have feelings. So my point is, though, that I genuinely think he wants peace in Europe. Essentially, America is, under Trump, is reevaluating its foreign policy. It is recognizing that we live in a multipolar world now. It's recognizing the fact that China is no longer rising, it has risen. It's recognizing the fact that Russia is strong again. And it's trying to go after, to instead of trying to dominate the world, which it recognizes is not possible anymore. The end of the American unipolar world is dead. There's nothing they can do about that. And so they're trying to control their own hemisphere. That's why you have this talk about Greenland and Canada and Europe and tariffs and all the rest of it. So they're trying to radically reorganize their foreign, away from the CIA. And the CIA are just crazy, stupid people, corrupt people. So, and that's what the British and Europeans are still stuck on, this idea of this outdated foreign policy. So that's why I do respect Trump, that he's trying to update and change foreign policy. And he's risking his life doing it, by the way. He could have been killed. He could well be killed in the next few years. So I actually respect people who risk their lives for their political beliefs, whether you're a leftist African revolutionary or whether you're a rightist white American. I don't know. I respect people who risk their lives for their political beliefs. But, but whether this, and I think now in the last few days, you've seen that Trump's attempts to bring peace are coming to an end. I haven't really been following news today, so please correct me if I missed something. But it seems that that America's pulling out from the peace negotiations they've tried, and
maybe. And so J.D. Vance gave a statement recently, because initially Donald Trump was like, "Well, this is my final offer," and then the final offer became, "Well, maybe a couple of weeks. We'll give it a couple of weeks." J.D. Vance came out and said this effectively: "Yeah, this war is going to go on for a little bit longer. We're not going to be able to stop it because, again, like what they would need to give the Russians to pacify them, it is difficult for an American president to do. He would have to, on some level, accept a surrender document, because the notion that the American president who is involved in the war is going to be the mediator is nonsense. Like, he's pretending as if it was Joe Biden's war as opposed to America's war. It was America's war. We were on the ground directing events. We were pointing out who to kill. We were given intelligence. We were killing Russians, like, to put it in real terms. And even the satellite footage, satellite imagery, the intelligence, all that stuff was coming from America. The weapons were coming from America. And so the idea that Donald Trump is trying to act as if, well, I don't really have anything to do with this, they're not going to accept that.
Yeah, but the Russians are very, they're very clear thinking, kind of rational people, in that they understand this has been a proxy war. As a British journalist working in Donbass, I've been in Russia for so long now, and people are really nice. Russian people are really nice, just like Americans are really nice. They welcome other people, and they're very interested. But at the same time, in Donbass, I'd have to be careful around Russian soldiers looked after me on the front line. but particularly if there's alcohol involved or whatever, I would be careful. Do you know what I mean? I would leave a bar if Russian soldiers came in and they were drunk, because now my Russian is better. But British journalists, when Britain is supplying weapons, maybe their friends have just been killed.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? You have to be careful. You have to look after yourself. So, but any American coming to Russia, you'll be absolutely fine. Maybe stay away from drunk soldiers, but that's probably true in America as well. But the Russian, even though America has been supplying weapons to kill Russian people, Russians are. They look at the world in a very cold-hearted, strategic manner. And for them, they see this new Trump administration as somebody who's moving away from the past and potentially trying to improve relations with Russia. So they're like, okay, fine, go for it. Let's see if that happens. But if it doesn't happen, the Russians are very happy, I think, to carry on the war until its military conclusion, to get what they want. But it is going to be an interesting few days, because there are some Russian analysts who say, that Russia would like an end to the war.
Mm-hmm.
But you have a very split now within Russian society, Russian political society, I think, of Russians who want to go all the way. They want to take Odessa. They don't want to take Kiev, but they want to take Odessa, which is a historical Russian city. Kharkov. A lot of pro-Russians in Odessa and Kharkov, by the way. They'd be able to control them long term. Kiev harder, certainly not West Ukraine. They all hate Russia there. But so many Russian nationalists want to go to Odessa. They want to take Odessa. They want to take this and that. Putin is very, very calm, strategic guy. He doesn't need more. Russia doesn't need more territory. Putin would be very happy to stop now. I don't see any territory changing hands, so long as they get what they want. That Ukraine demilitarizes enough so that it's no threat to these regions in the future, and that there is a calming down of what they call Nazism. I don't call it Nazism. There are a lot of Nazis, but it's the ultra-nationalist Ukrainians who have an ethnic hatred of the Russians, and that's that's problematic on Russia's borders. So if the deal is good enough for Russia to say, okay, this war won't start again, and whoever's got the territory keeps the territory, maybe we can do peace. And I haven't seen the intricacy of the deal enough to say whether Russia would actually take this at the moment, but it's going to be an interesting few days. But yeah, but if it looks like the war will continue, sadly. But Trump's done his best, and I respect him for that. It's been my life for the last few years. Not so much for bombing Yemen, but I respect him for trying to bring peace to Europe, because that's been my life for the last 3 years.
I mean, this war has been a catastrophe. And I've covered this for the last 5 years. I got to be honest, everybody at the station was shocked that it started. All of us had to eat crow when they went in. I agree with you. It's a special military operation. It's not a war. If it was a war, Oreshniks would be hitting Kiev, all of these cities. We were shocked. Like, every American got it wrong, because all of us were like, okay, the U.S. is making this up. They're not going to go in. Yes, there are Russian soldiers at the border, but that's because Ukrainian soldiers are at the border. The U.S. wasn't necessarily talking about it honestly in the way that they were reporting it. We were being far more honest about it. But when the invasion first took place, all of us were like, whoa, oh my God. And then it dawned on me, they're shooting each other in the face. Like, this is an actual war.
I remember
no, please
go on. I remember, I think it was in New York Times, one of the major new American papers. They said Russia is about to commit a false flag event in preparation for an invasion, which is great, because the Americans think that, because they thought they were right. For once, because no one believes American intelligence. So when American intelligence says Russia's about to invade, no one believed them. This is like the boy who cried wolf. But they said Russia's going to create a false flag, because that's how America starts wars. And other countries, by the way, you create a false flag first to be able to persuade your people of the necessity. But Russia never did a false flag.
They just
invaded because they knew that they would have support from the Russian people. But in the American mind, they knew the Russians were about to invade, so that Russia's about to commit some false flag attack, and they even put it in the press.
It's so bizarre. No, it took a bit for me to kind of realize, okay, this is a real war. This is a catastrophe. All of these people are dying for no reason. It never needed to take place. You know, you had Minsk 1 and 2, they blew it off. Not just blew it off, they were like, we used it as a pretext in order to build up a massive military. Like, you had all of these things, and then you had Putin begging for people to come to terms with him. And they were like, we don't need to come to terms with you. You don't get security guarantees. Soviet Union has collapsed. We don't have to deal with you in real terms. And at the point where he takes respect at the barrel of a gun, then Europe is freaked out. And Donald Trump, at that point, okay, we have to deal with Russia as a power now, because they've demonstrated that they're a power, and we don't really have any cards in the situation where we can really play. I mean, I guess my thing is, if Donald Trump really wanted to get a deal, this frozen conflict stuff wouldn't, you know, yes, no part of NATO. Yes, the Crimea is Russian territory. But Russia is wanting recognition of the territories that they've taken and that have voted to leave and be part of the Russian Federation. I mean, for God's sake, it's part of the Russian Constitution at this point. And it's like, okay, how do you get that? Like, that's a surrender, right? I mean, that's where the government of Ukraine formally recognizes these are your territories. Mm-hmm. And how do you get them to do that, short of Ukraine just fundamentally surrendering? And the catch becomes, is Russia willing to accept something less than that? You are there, I'm not.
I think Putin would accept less than a lot of people think. But only if that there is a kind of guarantee that the war won't start again. I mean, for the regions taken, Donbass, Zaporozhye, Kherson, Russia controls most of these regions, but it doesn't control Zaporozhye city, which is the capital of the Zaporozhye city, which is a big city. That the Ukrainians have that. They also don't control Kherson city, which is a small city, but it's the capital of Kherson. But that's on the other bank of the Dnipro River. So I think that the Russians will be very happy, even though I've had arguments with Russian people about this, but I'm sure I'm right, that Russia would say to them, okay, we don't need, even though it's in their country, we'll give you those cities, even though they're our territory, but they're on the Ukrainians control them. That I believe that essentially no territory will change hands unless it's strategically valuable for both sides that they agree. For the Ukrainians and NATO to give up a huge city like Zaporozhye, I can't see that happening. So I think Russia, that's a negotiating tool, and Russia will essentially say, okay, you know what? We want peace so much, we will give you these places we no longer want anymore. It's a negotiating tactic, in my view. But essentially, and will they get recognition from Ukraine that these regions are part of the Russian Federation? I don't think Ukraine and NATO can give that at the moment. And I think Russia would be happy with that. The Russians are, they don't want to end this war and say we defeated all of NATO, we're the best. No, the Russians are simply interested in securing their interests and their security. So I don't think they would need NATO to say, okay, this area is just an agreement that maybe in the future, just like Crimea, if that's given part of Russia, maybe in 10 years' time we can accept that that's part of the Russian Federation. So there's all these unique things in the negotiating, but essentially Russia will, I think Putin will, and it's not just Putin, by the way, it's the Russian establishment. Mm-hmm. They would need an understanding that the war won't start again.
It's that part. How do you
That's difficult.
How do you do that? It's that part.
But also, how do you denazify? As I say,
exactly.
Because that's get rid of the extremists in Ukraine. How do you do that without tanks in the capital and overthrow the regime? So I've always known that Russia will not lose this war, but how exactly do they actually end it? That is actually, and that's still to be decided.
I've been asking that question for a year because I couldn't figure out how they stop. It seems like once you start, you can't.
I asked that question yourself. I asked that question to Russian politicians, to Russian soldiers on the front line, and nobody really knows. It's kind of
nobody has an answer. Nobody has an answer.
The most common one I've heard is we need to send our tanks into Kiev. When you take the capital, that's how a war ends. I mean, that's just the most common argument of, politically educated people, whether they be frontline soldiers or Russian politicians, but nobody really knows. Not even Vladimir Putin knows. Nobody knows how it ends. But ultimately,
Oh, please. No, I'm sorry.
Especially now, if there's no peace, it'll only get worse for Ukraine and for NATO, and Russia will only be ultimately in a stronger position. That's my argument, and I argue, that's my argument, and the argument of many.
That's a rational argument, but that's not the argument that Europe is accepting.
No.
Which is wild to me. That's why I keep saying delusion is a beautiful place. The only thing I come to is, look, we have American politicians who've made the argument, we're putting in money, they're putting in their lives, why are you complaining? Which gets across the value of the Ukrainian soldier from the perspective of America, and I suspect from the perspective of Britain. They don't care. For them, we get to stick it to the Russians. Hey, maybe if we can bog them down in this war for another 2 years, we can build up our own military stocks and stuff like that. Like, they don't actually care about Ukraine in the real sense of the word. And Esteban, give me 1 second. I'm coming to you in a moment. Changing the government. Because one of the things, the only way I can see this war not restarting is if you have a different government in play, meaning the Banderites, the neo-Nazis, the far-right ultranationalists would have to be uprooted completely.
To have a change of policy in Ukraine, I think you need to change the government. I think you need to change Zelensky. I think you have to see a change of the regime, a change of Zelensky. And when Trump started, but even that, Russia actually, during the negotiations with Trump, Russia actually downgraded. They said, okay, we can deal with Zelensky, pretty much.
Well,
I think
to be
there was
fair,
agreement
they
with
said
Trump.
Zelensky is illegitimate, but we'll talk to him.
Sure. So, but listen, it's all, I don't believe there can be peace while Zelensky is still in power. I think they need to have a break from it. And Zelensky is very much controlled by the British, I think, and they're just crazy, and they want to carry on the war no matter what. So I think you're going to have to see a change of government in Ukraine. I think ultimately, when there's peace, Zelensky won't be in power.
So does that mean they have to go to Kiev?
That's the big question. I mean, I know too many people have been killed in this war, and I want the war to end. And Ukrainians, I have friends in Ukraine. I won't say too much about them. Pro-Ukrainian who don't like Russia now, but they're scared of going to war. You got these 18, 20-year-olds might have to be killed as well now. Yeah. Most of the people I know have been killed in this war are Russian people, but maybe it's difficult. It's difficult to say.
Just to be clear, I'm not trying to be callous. I agree with you. I've covered this thing for the last 3 years. I guess it's been going on for 3 years. It is frustrating for me because for me, it's like, this is insanity. It's like these people are killing each other over something that never needed to take place. But at the same token, I don't know how it ends, short of military force to end it, because it doesn't seem like the negotiating positions are anywhere close enough, meaning it doesn't seem like the Ukrainian military is weak enough where they'll say, okay, fair enough. Yeah. We're willing to make a deal.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like that's where they are.
If you listen to the Ukrainian statements, and Trump has come in, and I have, as I said, I have some respect for Trump. He's clearly a competent man. Biden was just not capable. The guy was senile. So I have respect for Trump. He's not an idiot, right? And he has some great qualities. But of course, he didn't understand the war in Ukraine like I do, and I'm sure, like you do. You've been following it for 3 years in depth. I've been here, so of course these people don't understand the war as much as we do. But I think he's been surprised by. You look at Zelensky's statements. We don't even accept Crimea. They're so far apart on the peace. They're so far apart, and I think you're right that ultimately Ukraine will have to be weakened to such a level that they're forced into giving up what they don't want to give. I think that's essentially, and I heard that 2 years ago, essentially, from some of the Russian soldiers, very smart people. Some soldiers are very politically educated people. A lot of them aren't so much. Some of them are very politically educated people. And that was even what I heard 2 years ago. It was 3 years ago. We're going to have to go to Kiev. I've been fighting for that not to happen, for Ukraine to keep on to more territory, but the Europeans and the Ukrainians want to lose more territory and want to lose more lives, and that's the delusion and the madness that you're speaking about.
Yeah, that's a catastrophe. Johnny Miller, man, thank you for this. I would love to have you back. So
I'd love to, Jamal. Fantastic. Yeah, love to.
thank you for this.
Let me
Johnny
know.
Miller, he's a British journalist based in Moscow. Again, that is an amazing thing, right? Covering the war, based much of the reporting from Donbass. So thank you for this, man. I really do. You be safe. Have a good one,
Thanks,
okay?
Jamal. Great to speak to you. Okay, ciao.
Absolutely. All right, I want to go to my next guest, the man himself, Esteban Curillo. Welcome to the show. Welcome back. Thank you for waiting. I was closing with him. It ran a little bit long. How you doing, Esteban? You doing okay?
Hey, Jamarl, I'm doing great. And hello to everyone who's joining us. And don't worry about it.
Absolutely. So Esteban Curillo, he's an Ecuadorian-based Ecuadorian journalist, currently writing for The Cradle, previously with Tele Sur English. Esteban, I have to hit something with you in order to get some understanding of this.
For sure.
So the Druze, Israel bombed al-Julanis, the jihadis, the jihadis with a makeover, the head chopper with a makeover, bombed the presidential capital or close to the presidential capital in Syria. And this is after putting out a statement effectively warning them, stop killing the Druze population in your ethnic cleansing campaign that the West is effectively whitewashed. Explain this. What is going on with this? In fact, there are other pictures of Druze in Israel just tearing stuff up, effectively saying, we need you to go and protect us, protect us. Ethnic cleansing in Syria, you need to protect us in Syria. And keep in mind, and I'm sorry to interrupt, Israel and Turkey apparently seem to have this kind of odd deal where they've carved up and balkanized parts of Syria, where Israel has taken a stake in Syria and so has Turkey.
Yeah.
So when they're saying protect us, I mean, for God's sake, Syria has been bombing Damascus. They've been bombing all over Syria in general. What is going on with this?
Well, it's a pretty big escalation, really. The Syrian president, as you said, the Al Qaeda government, really. These are all former Al Qaeda members.
Yeah.
Put out a statement calling it an escalation. I don't think there's going to be really a response from this Syrian army to Israel, because Israel has already taken control of about 500 square kilometers of southern Syria, and there's been absolutely no movement from Damascus to do anything about this. Now they bomb, meters away from his house, from Ahmed al-Shara's house, and they just put out a statement saying, don't escalate, because I don't know. I don't know what's at the end of that sentence. But in any case, what's happening, it's, as you said, there's been heavy clashes between the Druze, these ethno-religious community in the south of Syria, present in the region, right? They are present in Israel, in occupied Palestine. They're present in Lebanon as well. And they have the Druze and the Israelis. They seem to get along well together, in particularly in Syria, in southern Syria, and in Israel as well, in the occupied Golan Heights as well. So the Al Qaeda army in Syria has been essentially killing them, right? In a bit of a similar situation as what happened in the coastal towns. Now, remember, at the beginning of March, the Syrian government forces started killing and Alawites, another ethno-religious group from Syria, who have, according to Western media, they have ties to the government of Bashar al-Assad, just because Bashar al-Assad is himself an Alawite. So under that excuse, they whitewashed these crimes. They killed hundreds of families. They kidnapped dozens of young women who have been taken as sex slaves in Idlib, where Sharak cut his teeth. Governing, I guess. And now there's something similar is happening with the Druze, because the Druze, of course, are unhappy having these ISIS members, former ISIS members, former Al Qaeda members, who still wear the ISIS patch, who still, call for a caliphate and for the implementation of Sharia law and etc. They don't like having these patrols near their borders, having these checkpoints. So Druze armed men, as happened in the Alawite regions, start clashes with this army, and the army, of course, reacts in the way that you would imagine an army made up of former Al Qaeda and ISIS members to react, which is by starting a bit of an ethnic cleansing campaign. But now, since it's with someone that the Israelis seem have ties with and relationship with, and don't seem to mind sharing territory with the territory that they take. Israel comes in as the savior, right? They come in as the to save the day, the superhero at the end of the movie, saying we're gonna, we have the aerial superiority. We already destroyed all of Syria's military capabilities last year, so now we can come in and just throw our weight around, bully Al Qaeda essentially, and tell them don't attack the Druze. There's been talks. There's been already some de-escalation to in the south of Syria, but the clashes haven't entirely ended. Although security forces are saying, right, we have taken control. We are reaching agreements. Israel is what Israel is doing is what Israel does best, which is destabilize. Right. This is what they're doing in Syria. This is what they did from the fall of Assad to this day. And well, what is the Syrian government doing is exactly the same thing. What they do best, which is act like terrorist thugs, going house to house, shooting people, taking people hostage, executing people, chopping heads, chopping hands. You name it, they are doing it. So what is going to happen next? I truly have no idea, because at the same time you have the West, right, acting as if the Syrian government is, first of all, legitimate, which is not, because it's self-appointed, and dissolving even the constitution and the parliament. And second of all, they're committing atrocities. They're committing these horrible atrocities that, well, at the end of the day, we know that the West doesn't really care so much about atrocities anymore, as long as their interests are protected.
So right here, Israel warns the Syrian government. Apparently, this came out of Times of Israel. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz issues another warning on to Syria's new government against them harming the Druze population amid sectarian violence in Syria. I again warn the head of the Syrian regime, Jolani, if the harm to the Druze of Syria does not stop, we will respond very harshly. And as I was pointing out, they were wrecking stuff in Israel out of just blind anger and rage that Israel was not doing more to protect them in Syria. And I was looking at this like, what the hell is happening here? What is going on with this? Okay, fair enough. So they get along with Israel. Israel goes in basically to protect them. The Jolani government has not fired one shot in anger at Israel.
At Israel, yes. At Israel or Turkey, which is also, present in the north. Yeah. Their entire anger, all of their weapons are just being directed at civilians, because this is what such a government would do. Right now, Syria, it really stopped being a country. It really stopped being a state. It's just like a tool, right? Syria is a tool that is being shaped. As you said, it has already been balkanized, and its government, in the diplomatic sense, what are they doing? They are, welcoming the IMF. You have Qatar and Saudi Arabia coming in and saying, we're going to pay your World Bank debt. Imagine that. Imagine being so lucky that you have these Gulf nations come in and say, we're going to take care of your debt so that you can get more loans. But at the same time, you have these attacks. You have, are they in response to this violence by the terrorist army of Syria? It's really up for debate. I don't see, the Israeli army, after everything we've seen from them, all of a sudden, grow a conscience and be like, no, we need to protect civilians this time, right? Yeah. Like it's not about that. It's about throwing their weight around, and it's about, consolidating their control of southern Syria, including the southern communities. Now, remember, just a few months ago, I believe it was Israel Katz himself who said, we are not going to allow any armed presence south of Damascus, right? Not in the south of Syria, south of the capital, Damascus, where one of these neighborhoods where the clashes with the Druze have been taking place, Jaramana. So what does that mean, right, in practical terms? When you're a state and a different state comes in and says, you and your army and your armed forces cannot even step south of the capital, right? What is that if not occupation? And what is that if not land theft, right? Because it is what it is. That's what Israel is doing. So they want that entire region because, as we have discussed with you before, Israel does not want peace. Israel wants to expand its territory, right? And they have already managed to dismantle Hezbollah in Lebanon for the most part. They have already managed to essentially, with the help of Turkey and the Gulf nations, to collapse Syria, right? To turn it into a terror state, to turn it into a tool for their own purposes. Egypt, Jordan, might as well not be there. They are like zero factors. So now they can just continue, their creep towards their dream of greater Israel. And, at the same time, continuing to do what they're doing in Gaza, which included bombing a freedom flotilla this morning, full of humanitarian workers.
Yeah, I saw that. Israel has been dealing with fires. I think I put it, God got involved. I was watching all those trees go up.
Huge fires, yeah.
The fire just all over the place. Those videos were astonishing. I want to move to something else, though. I want to move to Iran for a bit because I want to get your take on something. And I've been asking many of the people who come on this very same thing because I'm very curious on points of view, because it's going to break one way or the other. And I want to get people put their point of view on video. So, all right, which one of these people were right? No, I'm partially joking. So I have made this point that I've been cynical about the negotiations, but hopeful, meaning I'm hoping that my cynicism is not founded. But then you get a tweet like this coming out of Hegseth, who, mind you, this tweet is coming out specifically because Hegseth could not pacify the Houthis, and it is humiliating to him that he cannot do so, even so much where British strike force comes into the Red Sea in order to attack the Houthis also. Now, Donald Trump has been able to murder a lot of civilians, but let's be very clear, they have been civilians. He's been bombing infrastructure, killing civilians. But it has been unclear at this point on whether or not, or how many actual fighters, or for that matter, assets they've been able to take down from the standpoint of the air defense. Houthis have been knocking out drones out of the sky left and right. I think it's been like 30. Recently, I think yesterday, they fired a hypersonic missile into Israel itself, aiming at the base, which is showing a level of technological sophistication that seems to be increasing, not, over time, not decreasing.
Exactly.
So Hegseth puts this tweet out to Iran, not to the Houthis, to Iran. We see your lethal support to the Houthis. We know exactly what you're doing. We know very well that the U.S. military is capable of. Basically, you know very well what the U.S. military is capable of, which is ironic to me because this tweet is being driven by their inability to pacify the Houthis. And yet he's saying, you know what the U.S. military is capable of. He said, you were warned, you will pay consequence at the time and place of our choosing. Okay, what the hell does that mean? That sounds like they're going to hit Iran.
It means, it's exactly what you said. Is this this humiliation that they are facing at the hands of Ansar Allah, right, the Houthis? Because how does a sandal-wearing militia, right, goat herders, as they like to refer to them, manage to do everything that they've been doing for over a year, more than a year now at this point, and the United States Navy with 2 aircraft carriers in the Red Sea at this moment, right? Because throughout the past year, there were more ships in the Red Sea trying to do what Hegseth has failed in doing, just like Lloyd Austin failed to do last year.
And that is declared. That's right.
Yeah, it hasn't changed, and because the strategy hasn't changed, and because we already know that this strategy is not going to work. But as Hegseth says in his tweets, what the U.S. Army is capable of. Yeah, burning money. At an alarming rate. They are very capable of doing that, and that's exactly what they're doing. Look at what happened, when they lost this F-18 just by dropping it into the sea. Why? Because they were trying to avoid an attack from Yemen. It's not just like Butterfingers. They dropped a plane into the sea. They were maneuvering to avoid attacks because these attacks come at a moment's notice. And I think one very important thing, and something you already mentioned, is that the amount of drones that they've been shooting down Yemen, they've shot down around 25, I think, so far, and that's a huge issue for the U.S. Not money-wise, as we said, the money is never really going to stop flowing, but in reconnaissance terms, in getting the intelligence that they need, right? Because they claim that they have, killed however many Ansar Allah leaders as they want to say. The reality is different. They really haven't. They haven't managed. They managed to target a few mid-level commanders. but they cannot get enough intelligence to actually know where to bomb so that they can destroy the missiles, so that they can destroy the leadership, so that they can destroy the launchers. Why? Because Yemen and their air defenses are shockingly advanced. Exactly. This is exactly what I'm referring to. This article.
I'm glad you mentioned this. So I'm sorry to interrupt. I'll just read this. Houthis air defenses have been hindering the U.S. ability to move into phase 2 of the operation, according to reports from CNN just today, citing unnamed U.S. officials. Quote, the U.S. was hoping to achieve air superiority over Yemen in 30 days, officials said, and degrade Houthi air defense systems enough to begin a new phase focusing on ramping up intelligence, reconnaissance, and surveillance of senior Houthi leaders in order to target and murder them. And they have not been able to.
Exactly, because they keep shooting down their drones, which are there to collect intelligence. And that's truly fascinating to me. Like, honestly, to me, that's such an interesting thing, because Yemen is very quickly becoming the United States' next Vietnam. Yeah. What is the answer going to be? And I think, because we've heard rumblings that they want to reactivate the civil war, that they want to activate these, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, or all of these UAE, Saudi-backed militias that are still present in southern Yemen, to essentially march, right, on the territories that are controlled by Ansar Allah. That's not going to go well. It didn't go well when Ansar Allah was weaker than it is before. It didn't go well when the war started between 2015 and 2022, when Saudi Arabia reached, essentially saw itself forced to reach an agreement with Sana'a because they couldn't handle the attacks, and they weren't making any gains after 7 years of war. It's so interesting because when this war starts, the Saudi defense minister says, standing next to Obama at the Rose Garden, this war is going to last 2 weeks. And now we have the CNN reporting, which is they say, we wanted to reach air superiority in 30 days. To them, Yemen continues to be this backwards military that they can simply come in and conquer. And Yemen keeps proving them wrong. They've been proving them wrong since 2015, when they didn't have the capabilities that they have today. Then again, I will say, Jamarlt, something that I've said in your show before, these accusations against Iran has helped, of course, the Quds Force, the IRGC Quds Force, has helped Yemen develop to the level that they are right now. Just like the United States sells arms to Israel so that they can be dropped on Palestinian hospitals, or, arms Ukraine to the teeth so that they can lose against the Russians, Iran helped Yemen. But at this point in the war, after a year of siege, you really must be a bit foolish to believe that Iran is managing to still pump weapons into Yemen. From
right
where?
There.
From
that
where?
part.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's like, how does that work?
Exactly. The Red Sea is under siege. The U.S. warplanes are flying over the Indian Ocean, and they're in Diego Garcia and force and mass. Oman is essentially mediating the nuclear deal, right? Oman, the one of the borders with Yemen. Saudi Arabia is attacking Yemen, right? Every so often they launch attacks to the border areas against Yemen. So you're telling me that any of these actors are allowing Iran to put in weapons in Yemen? That makes no sense. What Yemen has at this point, they are producing themselves, right? Like it's something that they have capabilities that they have already amassed. And we've seen since at least 2022, these huge displays of power from the Yemenis when they go, and they take out all the missiles and they march in these images that are reminiscent of, like a parade in North Korea or in Russia. Mm-hmm. The Yemenis have already had this for a while. This is not like all of a sudden now Iran is sending missiles and weapons. And one last thing, because I stayed too long on Yemen, and I know your question was about Iran. I think it's very telling what's happening this week in regards to the nuclear talks, because you have Marco Rubio replacing Mike Waltz as national security advisor, which is, I did not see that one coming, because it really seemed like Trump was trying to keep Rubio a bit away from the Middle East. Now that's no longer the case, right? Now you have Rubio in a very central position, and essentially playing two roles, right? And you have the U.S. pushing for the delay of the fourth round of nuclear negotiations by essentially saying...
I'm sorry, not pushing for it. It's already been delayed. I mean, according to Reuters says a source familiar with the matter told Reuters that the United States had never even confirmed its participation in the fourth round of talks.
So that's weird, because on Saturday, after the third round of talks, I remember clearly the U.S. was they don't often give out statements after the talks, but on Saturday they did, and they talk about progress, and they talk about this is, a positive thing. And the Iranians said the same thing, and they said, the Omanis are going to announce when the next round is. They announced it. They announced it for this Saturday. Then Iran comes out and says, we're going to meet with the E3 group of nations, which is Germany, France, and the UK, who are also signatories to the previous nuclear deal. We're going to meet them We're going to meet with them in France the day before the talks in Rome. And then all of a sudden, the US comes out and says, whoa, we didn't agree to a fourth round, which is strange, right? Because it's a fourth round. We're not talking about the second round. We're talking about the fourth one. Like technical teams have already met and started working on a framework. And now, more interesting than even all of this is these news that are coming out. I started seeing them this morning that are talking about the terms of the deal, of the nuclear deal. And they describe it as essentially the same as the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. And that also is a dodgy, is weird to me, because the Iranians have said very clearly that deal is in the past, it's done.
Right.
We are going to form a new deal.
Right.
And now you have Rubio talking about you need to walk away from the your long-range missile program. You need to walk away from Iranian enrichment, essentially saying, hey, Iran, you know your red lines? We're going to cross them. And we're going to cross them publicly.
Okay, so you're cynical about this too. I mean, because my take is, okay, you guys took maximalist demands that you knew they weren't going to accept. And under this guise of, okay, we're negotiating, we did all the negotiations that we could. We tried, when in reality, you hit the red lines right off the bat.
Exactly.
Enrichment. Iran said very clearly, we're not giving up our nuclear enrichment. This is not going to be a Libyan model. We are keeping our enrichment. We may lower it. We will allow you to inspect it, but we're not getting rid of it. And Rubio pipes out, they need to get rid of all of it. And what's wild about it, talking about the negotiations. So Aragachi, Iranian foreign minister, I just call him that. He comes out with a tweet trying to be very face-saving and says, together with Omani and U.S. interlocutors, we have decided to postpone the fourth round of talks for logical and technical reasons. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. I know why you put this tweet out. I get it, right?
Yeah,
Like,
he has to.
Yeah, he doesn't want to seem like, okay, the talks are falling apart.
Mm-hmm.
The talks are falling apart. You guys have hit an impasse. They are asking you for something that you have clearly defined that you cannot give and that you will not give. And the U.S. point of view is, okay, well, we're going to now use the Houthis as a pretext. We're going to say we're going to block all oil trade and embargo any country that takes oil from Iran, which is a bit rich because that means you're embargoing China. And you have Hegseth putting out a drunken tweet saying that they're going to attack Iran at the time and place of their choosing. That's pretty astonishing.
That's such a, when they talk about these talks collapsing, for sure, they're going to try to blame Iran, like they blame Hamas, right? Whenever the ceasebire collapses, even though it's Israel violating all the terms, they're going to blame Iran because Iran is trying to defend their own sovereignty, right? And I think because the Iranians are not negotiating from a position of power, I would say, right? They are the very fact that they came to the table speaks to their desire to de-escalate tensions, right? Like the Iranians talk a big game, but they're not interested in war. They really aren't. I think at this point they have proven it. From October the 7th to this day, even including True Promise 1, True Promise 2, the attacks against Israel, etc. Everything was so measured and everything was so, in some ways, even a bit for show. That at this point, I think the fact that the Iranians came to the table shows that they want to reach a deal, and I don't think the United States wants to reach a deal, and maybe actors within the United States do, because I think obviously within this government, as in any government, there's going to be the sensible voices. There's going to be the people that say, hey, we are spending, we're burning through so much money and bombs against Yemen. What are we going to do against Iran, right? But then what this really speaks of at the end is the amount of power that the Israel lobby continues to have within this government. Because don't be mistaken, if the talks fall apart, it's because Israel has been trying to interfere with them from the very beginning. They've said it themselves that they are, when they're meeting with the US officials before any of these rounds of talks, they say that we are here to influence. We're here to influence these talks. And what is a bigger influence for a government like that of Benjamin Netanyahu than to see them collapse entirely, right? And I remember yesterday, you and me, we talked a bit about what was happening. And I told you, I think it's going to be Witkoff because that's what they were saying. And if it's Stephen Witkoff, then I think, that shows that there's seriousness, because Witkoff has been, at the very least in the Iran file and in even the discussions with Hamas, he has made shocking progress, I would say, in comparison to, the Biden government and the
Right.
previous Trump administration. Witkoff actually made progress and got them to sit at the table and, was respectful of their red lines. But then you replace Mike Waltz with Marco Rubio, the biggest war hawk since John Bolton was at the White House. And you start making these threats, and that you walk away from the talks. And then where is the seriousness, right? That they were talking
weird,
about,
right?
Where's the progress that was being made? And the sanctions. Remember, Trump just yesterday comes
Yep.
out and says, we're going to sanction everyone who deals with Iran, right? Like anybody who deals with Iran at this point, buys oil from Iran, is open to secondary sanctions. That's not negotiation, right? You don't negotiate at the end of a gun. You don't negotiate at gunpoint. That's not it. It's blackmail. It's extortion. It's the same situation that Israel has been doing with Hamas, but now in a different sphere.
Well, I guess that's kind of gets to my point. Like, what was in his mind? Like I said, I've been cynical, but I've been hopeful because Witkoff did come across as a realist.
Mhm.
But if you notice, Witkoff liked that tweet by Hegseth. Like he shared it, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he
What is
reposted.
this strategy then? Yeah. Oh my
Yes,
God,
Steve
you're
Witkoff
right. Steve
reposted
Witkoff.
that tweet. And also, when Steve Witkoff came back and was talking about the negotiations, if you notice, initially, it sounded like he was sounding very similar. Okay, we need to get 3.36%. We need to make sure they don't get a weapon. We need blah, blah, blah. He gets attacked, and the position changes to be more maximalist. And then the next person who speaks is Rubio. And Rubio is like, they need to get rid of all their centrifuges, full stop. And that becomes the policy position going forward. All of it needs to go, which, I don't know who's in Trump's ear. I don't know if they're telling Trump, hey, we can really get so-and-so, or you need to get so-and-so. I don't know what it was, but something changed in regard to the rhetoric that was coming out of the Trump administration on this issue.
Mhm.
It's one thing if you send Witkoff and you tell him, get me a deal. It's another thing if you say, you must get rid of all the centrifuges, and that's a position that you need to take. Okay, if you're sitting him with that position, he's going to fail to get your deal.
Yeah.
So I don't know if Trump started this off with the notion of, okay, I'm going to try to get a deal because I don't want to get war. And somewhere along the way, after he's being pushed and pushed and pushed, he ups his demands. I don't know what was in his mind originally, but this is leading to a war, a skirmish.
It does. Like the slow creep continues. And it makes you wonder what is the game here at the end of the day, because you thought it was China, right? Like China is supposed to be the big war. And now the United States just continues to collect wars along the way. And, at the same time, you cannot, we also need to keep an eye on what's happening in Pakistan and India, right? Because it's also another attempt to ignite a completely unnecessary conflict. Why, right? At this point, it really feels like it's... the decisions for this past week are being directed by U.S. weapon makers, right? It sounds like Lockheed Martin and Boeing and etc. are the ones in Trump's ear being like, hey, we need to have another war, so that you want the economy to overcome your tariffs. You need war, because war is a racket. War is is the biggest money laundering machine that has ever existed.
Yeah, the Pakistan Indian one is more complicated though. I've spoken to both sides. I don't quite get it. I mean, like, yeah, you had terrorists murder 21 people. Okay, that part I get. I think it's 26. I think it was one Nepali. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That part I get. I totally understand India losing their mind over this, saying, what the F? This is intolerable. We're not going to accept this. Like, America wouldn't accept this, right? And to be like, okay, I have given my military full license to go after who did this. But Pakistan is taking it as if, okay, India is going to attack us. as opposed to India is going to attack the terrorists in a particular region. And India, on some level, connected to Pakistan, saying, look, you've been feeding these terrorists. Kind of like when Joe Scarborough told Netanyahu, you've been feeding that beast. Talking about Hamas, you've been feeding that beast.
Yeah, exactly.
You've been feeding these terrorists for all of these years. In which case Pakistan, well, we were feeding them for the West. Whatever, that may be true, but you've been feeding these beasts. And now you have the situation where they've killed all of these people. And then you get Pakistan saying, well, we think it's a false flag. Because how are they going to go 100 kilometers in order to come to Kashmir to do this? Okay, like, it's just wild. Like, and I don't live there where I would be like fixed to be able to have a real position or point of view on it. It's just, this is what these two sides are saying. It's
From
just
what
wild.
from what I understand about it, first of all, this group that was blamed for the attack
But PTI.
has been inactive for years. They just
Right.
reappear all of a sudden. The second thing, they actually, after, it was this statement that came out of taking responsibility, the same group came out a few days later saying, it wasn't us, we got hacked. So, up to you to believe them or not.
No.
But I think at the end of the day, really the question you need to ask yourself here is, if Pakistan and India start a war with each other, who are they going to be buying weapons from? Both of them, right? Because Pakistan, let's not forget, Pakistan is a government that was installed a couple of years ago by the U.S. Embassy. It was a government that came to power under a legislative coup that ousted Imran Khan from government.
Yes. Yes.
So don't forget all that, right? This is still that same government.
And by the way, that came up in the interview where they pointed out that part of the reason that some of this stuff can be taking place is because Pakistan is being ripped apart, and that the military has been basically the value of the military in the eyes of the public has been diminished because of what they did to Imran Khan. Like, it was clear as day they took Imran Khan out in the coup, and the U.S. backed that coup. Not just backed that coup. There was reports that came out that, God, man, it was so screwed up because Imran Khan.
Remember the letter that Khan pulled out of the U.S. Embassy, essentially, like that was addressed to the opposition, in which they were talking about ousting him from power.
Yeah, they said he was aggressively neutral. He was aggressively neutral in the Ukraine issue. And when Imran Khan posted that, effectively saying, look, they took me on the coup, they said it was illegal for you to leak out information pointing out that we took you out in the coup.
Yeah,
and they put his
because
ass in
he
jail.
shared that document. They said you share state secrets. Now you go to jail.
Think about that. I released information proving that you took me out in the coup, and you said, well, you weren't supposed to release that. Those are state secrets. And then it was something about his wife saying that his wife married before her menstrual cycle or something.
That they weren't, like they didn't have the correct documents for their marriage. Like some, like weird, obscure thing. They jailed the wife. Imran Khan is still in jail. His party is being persecuted, essentially being torn apart. And so, war, Pakistan and India, it's going to be two U.S. allies going to war with each other. So that's why I'm saying, who are they going to be buying weapons from? Who's going to benefit from a Pakistan-India war, right?
It would be a mess. And from my understanding, it wouldn't be a war. It would most likely be strikes against certain targets. Mm-hmm. Now, how Pakistan responds to that is something secondary, in which case India may respond to the fact that Pakistan responds. Like, it could escalate in this way.
Very quickly.
But we're talking about two nuclear powers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, this is not to be taken lightly. Esteban, man, thank you for this. I always appreciate these conversations with you. I really do. Thank you for this. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Jamarlt. I always enjoy coming on and having these talks with you.
By the way, and what are you guys covering for the Cradle, by the way? Just to give an announcement to the audience to check, out there.
Well, we are actually expanding our coverage a bit. We've started to cover a bit more about India, Pakistan. We're talking a bit more about the tariff war.
Have you? Okay, fair enough. So this is perfect topic.
We're slowly trying to do it, because it's becoming all of these stories are becoming bigger, right? So as you said, we are going towards uncertainty, and we need to continue with that. So and I would just like to remind people to check us out on YouTube. You can find our podcast. It's called the Cradle News Roundup. We go out once a week, so everyone check that out. And thank you for the time.
What day do you guys go? Just so they know.
I'm sorry.
What day do you run? You say
We
you
go on
run-
Mondays. Mondays we go. We have our podcast.
Okay. The tariff war, China's not backing down.
No.
China's not backing down.
Why would they?
And the U.S.
Why
economy is
would
taking
they?
a hit.
Yeah, they're being handed W's one after the other. Why would they?
Yeah. Yeah. This is not a good thing. I mean, 0.3% contraction. The dollar is weakening. Market has been falling. I think we've lost $1 trillion.
Like I said, that could be the answer as to why we're seeing these attempts to sabotage the talks against with Iran. Because this is how you keep your economy afloat, right? Like, sadly, that was what the U.S. economy has become.
But that's just that this wouldn't keep our economy going. That would be chaos. Like,
well, somebody's pockets are going to be, inflating. So,
yeah, I guess gas prices are going to go through the roof. Somebody's going to make a profit. Esteban, man, thank you for this. Esteban Curillo, he's Ecuadorian journalist, currently writing for the Krainer, previously with the great organization Tell Us for English. Thank you, my man. You be safe, okay?
Bye-bye, Jamarl. Thank you so much.
Have a good one. All right. Sarah Bils, she's coming up. She is with DD Geopolitics. She is awesome. She is absolutely awesome. What time is it? Okay, she should be here in about 15 minutes, give or take. So we have a little bit of time. I am going to go to domestic, and I understand at the moment that I say that 100 people are going to leave. I'm sorry for that. I mean, I can go to the tariff war, but there's not much going on in the tariff war. China is effectively just saying, we aren't budging, we aren't moving. There is slightly something. So the United States, Donald Trump has repeatedly said over and over again that China, he's talking to China. Now, his own people, his own trade people said, we're not doing that. China has said, we're not having conversations with Donald Trump. But Global Times released an article earlier, I believe it was today, either today or yesterday. And I don't entirely know how to read it. So what I would do is, all right, I'll just show the article. And you can interpret it the way you interpret it. Because my interpretation of it may be inaccurate. U.S. conveys information to China on several occasions, hoping to talk about tariffs. China is making assessments. Global Times. Global Times is considered kind of a mouthpiece. In response to questions asked by Chinese Ministry of Commerce, MOFCOM, I love that, has any further information and comments, as the United States has repeatedly said that it's negotiating with the China side on economic and trade issues and will reach an agreement. A spokesperson from MOFCOM said on Friday that China has taken note of repeated statements made by the U.S. side at high level and is willing to negotiate with China on the issue of tariffs. At the same time, the U.S. has recently taken the initiative to convey information to the Chinese side on a number of occasions through relevant parties, hoping to talk with the Chinese side. In this regard, the Chinese side is making an assessment. Now, what that sounds like to me is that the U.S. government reached out to China. Now, Scott Vincent, for all of the bluster, we want to help China out to reorganize their economic model to better suit the U.S. and China. We want to do it out the kindness of our heart. Okay, bro, just say it. The trade war has been kicking your ass. And you know that from the U.S. side, it is unsustainable. And China has been very resolute that this 5,000 years will come to an end before we buckle and bow to this nonsense that you guys are pulling. Those tariffs need to be removed before we are going to have talks. Full stop. That's our position. That position is not changing. We have nothing else to say. Mic drop. Leave stage. That's where they are. And whereas Donald Trump has been putting out these, yeah, we're having talks with China. I'm having imaginary talks with China at night. No, you're not. You're not. They're not talking to you. Not just not talking to you. We are going to have empty shelves. China can reposition their industries to various locations. So the soybeans, okay, they can get that from Brazil. The meat, they can get that from Australia. The oil, they can get that from Canada or from Russia, meaning they can get the products that they're getting from the U.S. from elsewhere. And from the U.S. standpoint, the U.S. believes that because we pay them money for their products, that they are somehow dependent upon us. Not so much. That just means empty store shelves in the United States. Now, you may damage the economy to such a degree where people aren't buying stuff, in which case you don't see inflation, or you will get people paying money for less goods, in which case you will get inflation. Things will go up. But more to the point, just for the fact that you're putting on tariffs, in general, the prices are going to go through the roof. And as those prices go through the roof, and as the dollar weakens, you're going to get weakened sales. You're going to get layoffs from jobs, meaning you're going to get all of these things, on all of these effects taking place at once. I showed you the article yesterday, I believe it was yesterday, that showed the 0.3% dip in the fourth quarter. It was 2.4%, I believe. I kept saying, making the point, it was a 2.7% drop. Now they're trying to say, well, that's Joe Biden's economy. Dude, no. You put those tariffs on. You created market volatility. You did that. When the stock market was collapsing, that is your stock market. You've been here for over 100 days at this point. You have to own it. They don't want to own it. They are living in this magical world where Donald Trump can spin yarn into gold and just run with, it's not our fault. We didn't do it. And yeah, you get a lot of posturing coming from Scott Bensent and Donald Trump, effectively pretending as if we're perfectly fine. We're perfectly fine. We're doing great. The world is fantastic. The sky is not falling at all, when indeed the sky is falling. You are damaging your economy in real terms. And even Scott Bensent himself, in a closed-door meeting, made the point of saying, we cannot keep this up. We are going to have to come to terms at some point. This is unsustainable. It is unsustainable from you because you have markets that you have to deal with. And yes, whereas China has markets, that is a communist government where they have far more control over what they're willing to tolerate and what they're not. And they have defined this as being one of the most important things in the world to them, that the world will end before they acquiesce to this level of bullying. On top of that, China has started to work with other countries. Even the EU has come out saying, we are not going to accept 10% tariffs from the United States. We're negotiating. This is intolerable. We're not going to accept it. And so China has been making inroads. Xi Jinping has been making tours all throughout Southeast Asia, trying to bring up all of these countries in alignment, saying, do not acquiesce to this nonsense. If you do, you will be on your knees for the foreseeable future. We need to work together against the U.S. on this. The U.S., for its part, realizes, oh my God, we've stumbled into a trade war that we can't extricate ourselves from and that we can't win on our own. And so the U.S. has started going to other countries, trying to get those other countries to work with them to gang up on China, to try to isolate China. Every country it's gone to said, kick rocks. Even Japan has said, kick rocks. And on top of saying kick rocks, saying we are not going to damage ourselves and damage our relationship with China for you and the nonsense that you've decided to pull. That is the context, right? So if this article is right, then it may be true that behind the scenes, the U.S. is saying, hey, psst, psst, can we talk? Can we talk? Shh, can we talk? Don't tell nobody. Don't tell nobody. It's like you're trying to act like the girl with the skinny legs is not yours. The girl with the skinny legs is yours. You just don't want to own it. In this very specific case, the U.S. is most likely trying to and would be willing to come to some kind of terms. The problem is, I can't come to terms with you if you're trying to Bigfoot me in this way. You're not my superior. You're not a cop. You're not my authority or dominant. We're equals. I see you as an equal. The notion that you're going to treat me as something other than that will not be accepted. And so there's nothing to talk about if that is indeed the position that you're going to take. And so from China's point of view, you'll be waiting on that phone call forever. You'll be waiting on a train that would never come. Apparently, the U.S. is no longer waiting on that train. The U.S. has decided in some kind of back channel way to reach out to China. Now, China says we're making our assessment. Now, what they have said in the past, however, was until you get these tariffs away, we have nothing to talk about. So maybe that assessment is you remove the tariffs, we start talking. Who knows? I don't know what that is. But right here, it says, the spokesperson said China's position is consistent. We will fight if fight we must. Our doors are open if the U.S. wants to talk. The tariffs and trade wars were unilaterally initiated by the United States. And if the U.S. wants to talk, it should show sincerity and be ready to take action on issues such as correcting wrongful practices and canceling the unilateral imposition of tariffs. That makes all the sense in the world. Now, Scott Vincent, for his part, has flipped reality on his head and effectively said, well, China needs to come and talk to us. That's pretty astonishing. You understand, though, that if China does come and talk to you, that will be them implying that they need to come and talk to you and that you are somehow the dominant in this position, which from their point of view, you are not. He did this on the fly. I don't know if there was a strategy to it. It seems that he stumbled into a trade war that he couldn't pull himself out of. And now, stuck in this trade war, the U.S. economy is being damaged. We're going into stagflation. We will have a recession with higher prices. Inevitable at this point. And he is talking about 200 countries. Okay, for one, they're not even 200 countries. In fact, I think if I have the clip up, where he is having this conversation about all of these countries that he's effectively in conversation with. I don't know if that's even true. Donald Trump lies as easily as he breathes, and everybody around him fundamentally kisses his ass. So reality doesn't all that much sink in. But oh yeah, I have to show this too. The CIA made a video trying to entice Chinese spies. Now, the last Chinese spies, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if they had their heads chopped off, but they were executed. But hey, let's throw the ball again. So this is the CIA putting out its video, trying to entice anybody in China that is willing to come over to the side of the U.S. and be a spy. No, I'm being serious.
俗话说筑梦人生，可惜我是为他人之梦。这场梦中，我无法决定结局，我的命都由他人掌控。这辈子努力耕耘，最终都是他人作手。照理来说，中规中矩，努力低头做事，应该换来美好人生。
Now, to be fair, I have no idea.
好像只有少数人能得到这种。
I'm going to kill this. Basically, hey, if you want to be a spy for us, you can come over. You can call us. You can get in contact in some way. And we will hook you up. And you can be one of our spies. You can be one of our assets in China. You can feed us information. The world will be great for you. See that nice watch? You may be able to buy that watch. See that nice car? You may be able to buy that car. When did social media become the medium by which we get spooks from other countries? When I talked to John about this, John Carrillo, spy for the CIA, John would say he would go into a country and he would start very small and this kind of just happenstance meeting. Hey, how are you doing? Oh, I'm doing fine. Oh, you come to the store often? Yeah, I do come to the store often, every so often. Very small. And at some point, you have a conversation with a person, maybe bring up their work. Oh, really? You work at that place? Yeah, I work at that place. Meaning you're ingratiating yourself to somebody slowly. And at some point, there's an ask. Hey, do you think you can tell me about so-and-so? They may say, or they may not. And at some point, you want to formalize the relationship where it's, I'm a spook and you're my asset. Are we on the same page? And if the answer is yes, the world is great. A social media ad is a bit weird to do that in that way. In fact, I would have believed that China would have put out its own social media ad just to see who would bite to be a spy in the first place, if that makes sense. Meaning that would make more sense for China to put out in order to catch potential spies, as opposed to the CIA to put out to enlist spies. That is very weird that we're using social media for that. But okay, we're using social media for that. My Chinese isn't that great, though. My Chinese isn't that great either. So fair enough. You're the mark, and I'm the street magician. Right. It is a very weird way to go about getting spies, but this is on the CIA's website. Just so we're very clear, this is not me making this up. This is on the CIA's website. They put this on their own website. CIA, you reposted. Yes, I reposted because I'm astonished by the fact that they put this out. That is amazing. That is amazing. Social media has revolutionized our world in so many just bizarre ways. That has to be one of the most bizarre. That has to be one of the most bizarre. By the way, Waltz is out. Waltz is out. And I killed the commercial. I killed the video. So the last video that Waltz did was something like at 8 a.m. in the morning, give or take. I pulled it down when I bought him my guest. He did a video at like 8 a.m. in the morning, being a hard ass on the issue of Iran. And as he was being a hard ass on the issue of Iran, he goes through the interview. The interview goes fine from my point of view, just in general. And after the interview, 30 minutes later, he no longer has a job. He no longer has a job. Now, what's wild about that is, where's that video? I guess it doesn't matter. What's wild about that is Trump immediately puts them into the UN, effectively saying, okay, I'm going to advocate for you to be a UN representative for the United States, because they were humiliated by the fact that they got rid of Mike Waltz. The reporting on it is that part of it had to do with the signal leak. Part of it had to do with him not getting along internally with the various members of Trump's team. J.D. Vance at one point took him to the side and said, hey, you need to be more collaborative in the way that you engage people. Chief of Staff Susie Wiles, apparently he tried to treat her like a junior and was condescending to her when it was the other way around. She was his boss. And eventually it just didn't work out. So they got rid of him. All right. So why do you have this guy on CNN trying to claim that Mike Waltz wasn't fired, that he just wants to go home and spend more time with his family? No, really. Even Jake Tapper was like, just totally, you're out of your mind. This clip is awesome. And he is literally trying to say, nope, he wasn't fired. Trump didn't fire him. Because again, if Trump fired him, it's humiliating. And so Trump doesn't want to own up to the fact of it being humiliating. It's the Hegseth thing, right? If you get rid of Hegseth, it's humiliating that you've had to fire another one of the people that you yourself, Donald Trump, selected. This is what he's saying.
Mike has a young family, and he has actually a new family, if you want to think about it in terms of most members of Congress. It's tough. I talked to him sometimes. He said he hadn't seen his kids in 6 days. It's a high pace. President Trump has a remarkable energy level, and he drives hard, and everybody around him has to keep pace. He likes Mike. President Trump, I know, really likes Mike. And for the fact that he's going from an appointed position to a cabinet position will tell you how much he wanted to keep Mike around. But there's a family balance that a father of young kids has to have. You want to be there to raise your kids. And so I don't see it as a shakeup at all. I see it as a transition to still keep Mike in an advisory position to the president.
I'm sure that there will be quality of life improvement, but that's not why this is happening. This is happening because the president doesn't want him to be national security advisor.
Well, you're making that assumption.
I love that. It's like, I'm sure there will be quality of life improvements now that he's been fired. I get that, right? You can say that from anybody, right? Hey, man, I'm going to let you go because I want you to have a quality of life improvement. Wait, you're firing me? Yes, I'm firing you. And he's like, no, dude was fired. Trump let him go. In a tweet, he found out in a tweet. You're assuming that. Okay, there's a ham sandwich on the moon. Let me bring in my guest. I don't want her to wait. She is awesome. She's getting herself together. All right. There she is. Sarah Bils.
This early in the morning, I will not have myself together for at least an hour or so. We'll see, but I'll try.
You always look together when you come on, so you present it well. if behind the scenes, like if internally, it's like, okay, I'm still frazzled. Sarah Bils, independent journalist, U.S. Navy veteran, and co-host of DD Geopolitics, a fantastic network. I call it a network. You guys do YouTube. You also have. I often see your blurbs on Twitter. This is where I see many of the blurbs, and they often inform me as I go out about my day. It's like, oh, and I'll go look it up.
Sometimes they even inform me. I'm like, oh, I didn't know that. The last post, I'm like, I don't know.
Definitely check them out on YouTube and definitely check them out on Twitter. They're awesome. They're fantastic. How are you doing? You doing okay this morning?
Yeah. How are you?
I am doing okay. I'm kicking, I'm still kicking, still alive, still, breathing this air. I'm still moving. I asked you if there was anything you wanted to talk about, and you said you wanted to talk about, what was the name of it one more time?
Oh, Palantir and
Palantir, that's it.
And also the state-sponsored media. I think that's just so wild.
Palantir is buying media?
No, no, Palantir in El Salvador. But the other thing that I'm really interested in lately is this new MAGA influencer press briefing that we've started doing this week.
Yes.
Fascinated by this.
Yes, because what they've been doing is bringing in MAGA influencers into the press briefing. So instead of having these kind of stodgy Washington types, they've been propagandists. I don't know another word for it, right? I mean, look, let's be honest. The press secretary is the propagandist in chief in general, whether it's under Joe Biden, whether it's under Trump, whether it's under Obama, whoever it's under. But there's a whole different element to it when the people who are sitting there are effectively MAGA podcasters who are there asking Donald Trump, sir, you smell great today. Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
It's always like that. It's like some weird pandering lead up. The clip that I've been using is a clip with Carolyn Levitt and Deborah.
Yeah.
I always forget her last name, but they're in the blue press room, and just the exchange is so robotic and rehearsed and it's obviously scripted that it's just like it's appalling at like the insult to our intelligence. I know that there's probably swaths of people that believe this stuff or that think Deborah is an authentic and good actor.
You think so?
No, I'm sure that there are plenty of people that just want to believe that, that MAGA is good. I know MAGA people are very head in the sand type people, but it's so obvious and in your face. And after the years of them, especially the Trump admin and Trump and his surroundings have been trying to convince us that RT or Sputnik is so bad. It's state-sponsored media, scripted Russian media. And now I'm looking at Caroline Levitt, who has no journalistic experience. She has no experience really whatsoever other than marrying a rich guy and having a pretty face. And then so she's in there and she's there with Deborah, who also has no credentials, but has a pretty face. And they're both wearing, and you can tell that they're wearing what you would think like a kid would dress up when they're trying to like go do the news with somebody. They're like these button down, like faux Chanel suits. It's like, you're not Jackie O. And they're like, well, what are you going to do in the future to make sure that Trump still retains his, history said, historically high approval rate? And Caroline Levitt's like, that's such a great question. You're just like, who is this for? Like, who is this being produced for? I mean, and then like, I know this is a big hanger for a lot of people, not so much me, but I'll mention it anyway. The Tim Pool being in the White House, it has got people, and rightfully so, it has got people completely up in arms about, and nothing against Tim Pool personally. And whether you like his opinions or not, I don't even watch the show. There's nothing to do with him. But about 8 or 10 months ago, we were being convinced that him and his cadre were all Russian bots. Russian bots.
Right.
They're in the White House, and it's just like, you guys told us they were Russian bots. Like, what are you? And now he has a meeting with Netanyahu, and now he's the White House press corps. And it's just like, does any, and it feels like people are being like fire hosed with so much stuff because you want to talk about Waltz. This all happened this week too. And it's like, people don't even have time to like catch normal people that like don't pay attention to the stuff or aren't required. They don't have time to realize what's going on and like, you know, kind of take a step back. They also don't have time to care that much. So it's like, who is this for?
That goofball tried to convince Jake Tapper that Waltz wasn't fired. Waltz, I could show you the video where Trump gets on Air Force One and leaves Waltz standing outside on the tarmac. Like Waltz gets, that video is humiliating. Waltz is out there with Trump. All of them are going to Air Force One. Trump gets on the plane. Everybody else gets on the plane. Waltz is out there on the tarmac. And at that moment, he realizes he was fired.
Put like music to it. Like, everybody heard.
Yeah. It's pathetic. But that guy's like, no, Trump, he just wanted to spend more time with his family. That's all. He just needed more family time. That's all. That's all it was. That's all it was. And Jake Tapper was like,
it's like, who believes this? If it was about his family, why wouldn't he just announce it himself?
Trump announced it in a tweet.
Yeah, he's got to go for his family. Like, you guys don't even try anymore. You don't even put in an effort into like the story. It's just, it's bad. It's bad theater.
I feel some kind of way about the press thing. I really do, right? I think you should. I worked at Sputnik.
I think you should.
And there's no way to prove this, right? And as I tell my mom, when doing an independent channel is different than working at like a state station per se, because on your independent channel, he's independent. He was giving his point of view. But if you're on, let's say, RT or Sputnik, they think by definition that because you're on there, you're toting the Russian line. It doesn't work that way in practice. When the people are on those, everybody that's on Sputnik in the States, that's their real opinions. You have people who are hard right, libertarians, communists, right-wingers, everything in between. And they're just giving you their take. And if there's any commonality or point of view, they're anti-war. It's just that.
Yeah.
And so it's not like if somebody is giving their take, it's their actual take. When I leave that station, I'm just giving my actual take.
Right.
But that's not the way it's perceived. When I see what is taking place with Trump and all of these people are kissing his ass, and you would say something like, hey, the economy has contracted by 0.3%. It was 2.4% in the previous quarter. That's a 2.7% contraction. Do you think it has anything to do with your trade policies? Nope. If you take out all the bad stuff, the economy is doing well. And it's like, wait a minute, but you can't just take out all the bad stuff. It's the bad stuff that makes the number right. And there's why not? Why can't you just take out all the bad stuff?
Right.
Like that's the conversation you would get from Trump and everybody around Trump and from the press room. If you get that question at all, it's frustrating. It's aggravating.
I've actually been talking about this philosophically with a good friend of mine on Twitter. And we've been talking about like manufacturing, like social proof, manufacturing, like social clout, manufacturing all of this stuff. Kind of like if you just say it long enough, and if you're the one who wields the power, eventually you're the one who's right. I mean, we were talking about bot armies because in that instance, it's like, well, I have 2 million followers. So obviously I have some sort of credentials or I have some sort of qualification and people like what I say and they generally agree, but they're not telling you that half of them are bots. So it's like they're standing on and that's exactly what Trump does. They're standing on this facade soapbox of being, I'm the president of the freest country in the world. I'm president of the free world. I'm the leader of the free world. I wield the power. What I say goes. And it's almost like, I don't even have to make it believable anymore.
Yeah.
That's how it feels with this admin. It's like, I don't know if they're stupid or they're just like, we don't even have to make it believable anymore because we have all the power. We have all of the cards. We can deconstruct and reconstruct reality if we want to. They said, and maybe I'm being a little crazy, tinfoil hat, we can manipulate time and space. Like, I mean, I don't think that they literally can, but in a sense, they are manipulating reality.
You don't know that. You don't know that. You don't know if they can or not.
They always see a UFO at the most opportune time, and they announce we can time travel when things are really going to crap. Isn't that crazy? But you know what I mean? They're, in a way, they can. They do manipulate. They manipulate the story. They manipulate history. They rewrite everything. And it's them deconstructing what we know to be normal, what we know to kind of anchor us down. And so I don't want to get too deep into it, but it's like Elon Musk. They support Elon Musk, who is a completely unconventional family man, completely separate and outside of what is deemed to be conservative values.
Right.
And he's telling us that they're telling us he embodies a lot of the core values of the party. And you're saying, well, if they're the party of tradition, and Elon Musk is one of the bright rising stars in the party, and he has a harem of baby mamas that live in a compound in Austin, and they're telling me that's normal and that's the definition of success. Well, then guess what? That's the new normal, and that's what people are going to strive to, and that's what these people with incredible amounts of money and power are able to do. They're able to alter what we believe to be norms.
But see, norms are dependent upon the person and what they can do. I mean, if you're the richest man on the planet, you can have a harem. You can have 2 harems.
Exactly.
The richest man on the planet, right? If you're Bob Cobb making $15 an hour, less so. It's harder to pull off. Right?
That was just an example, but again, it's like if I had, it should be because you have the money and the power, you should have more of the responsibility to uphold the norms that keep society functioning as it does.
This is America. That doesn't work that way here.
Exactly. I mean, that's the conclusion that I come to in the end. I'm like, well, they don't have to, because they're the richest people and the most powerful people in the most powerful country on earth. So what do they don't have to do anything. So.
Think of foreign policy, for example. The United States has decided to tell Iran, a sovereign country, at the behest of another country, that it has nukes that are undeclared, that has slaughtered 100,000 people, 2/3 of which are women and children, that has invaded West Bank, Gaza, Syria, and Lebanon, and has looked at Iran and says, we're going to attack you if you don't get rid of your nuclear power program.
Right.
Our own assessment has come out and said, well, they're not trying to get nukes. And we still say, we will attack you if you don't make a deal with us, despite the fact you're a sovereign country. No, that's not ethical. That's not moral. That's not under international law. That's just, you have the power to do it, so you do it. I guess my point is, it's an apple pie for Elon Musk to be the richest man on the planet and say, hey, I'm as rich as can be. I'm going to have a harem.
Yeah.
It's not about what's right. It's about what you
not
do.
anymore. Yeah. The norms aren't what's right, and what's right is not the norm. Exactly.
Yeah. And we lose something in that. I agree with you. We do lose something in that. I 1,000% agree with you. But that has been U.S. foreign policy.
Oh, 100%.
Forever. Like if you think of the kill squads in South America, I think the difference is, and God, man, we're on the tangent. The audience is not going to give
No, because you're going into the kill squads in South America. This totally segues right into Palantir and El Salvador and all of that. But yeah, go ahead.
Perfect. If you think of the kill squads in South America, American public didn't know. Like when they were watching Beaver Cleaver and they were watching, the television where the people were nice, the people were perfect. The people had these values that they upheld, and they were ensconced in the television that you were watching. Like Beaver Cleaver would have never, I don't know, slap somebody and call them an N-word, right?
No.
It would shock the conscience. Or you would never have a 15-year-old having sex on TV.
I remember the first time I heard them say shit on TV. I was like, what?
Exactly. But that's what I mean. But while that vision of America was taking place, we had kill squads in South America.
Yep.
We're knocking over governments.
Mowing down streets.
Yeah. And so I guess I'm saying, like, that sense of right and wrong, that value set, it was a facade.
That's a really good point. So it's almost like that has sort of been lifted, and now we're seeing really how the sausage is made, and it's not pretty. But you know what? As Americans, we don't care. It's like power forward. If that's the sort of the vibe that I'm getting. I'm not saying as Americans, like regular Americans. I'm saying the elites that obviously hold the power. So that's a really, really good point. But the death squad thing, as you mentioned it, and I'll use it to segue. The death, not just Palantir, it's the entire militarization of Latin America, and even these gangs, these MS-13 gangs are just the progeny of the death squads that we trained, created, armed, and still do to this day. I mean, they're using American weapons and they're trained on them. There's a book called The Irregular Army. It's really good, and it talks about how gangs and cartels in the early aughts, the early 2000s, infiltrated the military to learn training, to get training, and they would the people were going over to Afghanistan and Iraq, and they were seeing gang graffiti all over the walls because gangs were battling in these places with American weapons. Yes, like we do things that people can't even imagine, and now we're like, well, we got to declare a war on these cartels. They're getting out of hand, guys. We created a monster, right? And instead of right, changing our foreign policy, or, well, God forbid, because it's been the same for over 100 years in Latin America. But instead of changing our foreign policy and addressing the actual causes of the problem instead of the symptoms, we're now just going to build private facilities in El Salvador to be funded and contracted through Eric effing Prince, who are going to be on American soil, who can then just move Americans there as well. So it's like, it's blowback to the maximum, to the maximum. It's incredible. And, while they're telling you all of these things, like, what will you do in the next 2 weeks to keep Trump's ratings historically high? In the meantime, they're talking to Anduril and Palantir about how to get drones together and use intel to identify people on a 3 million person enemies list that they have. There's a list of 3 million American citizens that are classified as enemies. I'm guessing since it's that large, you're probably on it too, but I know I'm on it. So it's like,
wait, why do you think you're on the list?
Because it's for political dissidents and people who don't agree with the administration. And Palantir has access to that list. And Palantir also scored contracts with ICE. Yesterday, Brian Berletich also posted, interestingly enough, I was
about to bring him up, by the way, because he's on one of those lists. And I had a conversation with him.
A lot of those lists.
Yeah. And he says, I'm not going back to the States. He said flat out, he's like, I'm not going back to the States. I'm on the list. And I was like, what do you mean you're on the list? Because it just seems outlandish to me, right? When somebody tells me they're on the list. I know Scott Ritter is on the list for the Ukraine thing, like a kill squad or something like that. And when Brian told me, I was like, but you just run a YouTube channel. Like, what do you mean you're on the list?
It's dangerous because he uses their information against them. He uses all Western sources and just points the stuff out for his listeners. And they really hate Brian. Brian's incredibly intelligent.
Yeah, he sent me the clip or the article where his name was, there he was, Brian Berletich. He said, I'm never coming back. He said, they're not gonna get me.
Well, I'm sure he's having fun in Thailand, but he wrote yesterday, and it's funny because the reason why I keep on digging onto Palantir is because all this stuff keeps on coming full circle. These people have Peter Thiel used Gaza as a testing ground alongside Lavender and Clearview AI to kind of hone these sorts of things. And that's why it's important geopolitically. So they use these gadgets in Gaza to kill people, getting them wrong, as we know, a lot of the time, but it didn't matter because it's Gaza, right? And we're just going to train the AI and it'll figure it out. Well, now who scored the contract for the AI? Ukraine is getting it. The drones that are trained with Palantir and Anduril technology are now being sold to the Ukraine via Donald Trump. This came out from Brian Berletich yesterday. I was talking about it last night. So it continuously comes full circle with these companies. So Palantir, Anduril, and SpaceX are now working together to create a Golden Dome, which will be an air defense system that is basically for rent to other countries. An air defense system that is completely independent of a state, ran by 3 private companies, Anduril, Palantir, and SpaceX. and they're going to go and pitch this to people. They're already talking about it with El Salvador. And that's what we're doing. We're privatizing this sort of stuff. And it's getting worse. It's getting very serious.
Who is attacking El Salvador?
MS-13 that we created.
I know, but why do they need air defense for MS? Why do they need air defense for MS-13?
They have the cartels have drones too.
Are you serious?
Oh yeah, the cartels have drones. I don't think they have artillery, but they definitely have drones for sure. But I mean, it could be rented out to look at how Starlink has spread. Do you ever notice that Starlink? I mean, it does go to a lot of places, but it's very interesting places that you discover Starlink. Especially when it was in the Sahel, and we found that all of the terrorists in Mali were using it. Those are the type of people that are going to get the Golden Dome.
Well, see, that's the rub, though. I mean, that's a capitalistic thing. Like, they don't care who they sell it to. They just want somebody to sell it to.
Exactly.
And so if, terrorists need internet access to, right? And I know that sounds bad. But
how are they going to update us on X about what?
Right. Right. Yeah, how did Jihad is going to let us know if they're doing something if they don't have their Starlink in the desert?
The influencers are on our state-sponsored media now. The influencers run Twitter, which is just an extension of the state media. The person who runs Twitter is in private contracts with the state. They're running things to abuse and harass regular Americans, but obviously testing them out on non-Americans for now. It's it's so dystopian. Yeah. If people really sat down and tried to tease it all out, just start with Peter Thiel and see where every place he has his tentacles into, and it just gets frightening. And the thing that really got me up on the tangent was to bring us full circle is the Blue Room with Caroline Levitt, because I was like, this is so dystopian and what they tell me North Korea is like. And so I was like, these people, it's sick. It's really sick.
But each one is an extension of the other, though.
Exactly.
I know Democrats like to make this argument like Donald Trump is somehow uniquely different. And he is grotesque. And his ego is different. In the sense, most people are not shameless in the way they want to be fed their ego. They may want it, but they don't want to admit that they want it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
He's okay with being just shameless in the way that people bow to him, and it's weird. Most people are like, oh, that's hey man, I need you to have a little bit more dignity about yourself. Trump doesn't think that way. No. It's give me more. There's a scene in Boss. Yeah. There's a scene in Boss with Kelsey Grammer where Kelsey Grammer goes to the bathroom, uses the bathroom. The guy knows that Kelsey Grammer is using the bathroom, sees that he doesn't wash his hands, and Kelsey Grammer comes out and puts his hand up and expects him to shake his hand, fully knowing that he didn't wash his hands. Political power. That's Trump.
Yeah.
That's who Trump is. Most people are not that shameless. So I agree with you. It's bizarre to see it. When you watched recently when Donald Trump was in the room and they were doing the Hunger Days thing, and everybody had a Make America Great hat sitting out in front. And each person had their dear leader moment where they were saying how awesome Donald Trump is. Oh, he's such a leader. He's so great. He does excellent work. And they go to the next person. They'll do the same thing. Next person, they'll do the same thing. And it's like, okay, dude, are you serious right now? All of you are kissing his ass shamelessly. It's weird. So I agree with you. It's bizarre. It's very bizarre. It's full circle. It is full circle. The stuff that they're using, though, the El Salvador thing is interesting because, what is his name?
Bukele,
thank you. Bukele, the reporting has come out. I think it was Drop Zone News. Ryan Grimm reported this first, and then I think other news outlets picked it up a little bit later. Bukele has been working with those gangs. He's not the separate and distinct thing that is pacifying the gang population. He was working with groups like MS-13, with making deals with them where they would kick back money for his campaign, and he would effectively keep them out of jail as long as they keep the violence down. Basically, hey, if you cut down the number of killings, I won't bother you too much. I may even help you with some of the other gangs. You kick back money to my campaign, and we can have a great relationship. And I can go on TV and say, look at what I've done to pacify the gangs. The killings have gone down. The murders have gone down. The robberies have gone down. I am fantastic at what I do. And that was the scheme that Bukele was working with. One of the guys that was picked up by the United States, Bukele wanted him back in El Salvador because he didn't want him to talk to the prosecutors here in the United States. Trump pardoned the guy, shipped him to El Salvador. Like, it's an incestuous relationship that these guys are working with. And your point is, and now they're also bringing in Palantir in order to, I guess, build criminal prisons or private prisons.
They're going to build a surveillance system in the prisons that will be built and supervised by BlackRock. Well, now it's called 2USV, but yeah, BlackRock's involved.
Wow.
So I'm glad you brought up that thing, because people really think like he got elected by the people. I'm like, he was thrown out of 2 political parties prior to leading up to his presidential election.
Right.
Okay, so he got elected by the people, and then they're like, okay, well, what's your reasoning for why he reduced the crime that fast? And it's like, that doesn't happen overnight, like on a whim, because you're like a good guy. Like you need to employ like tactics in order to do this, which is usually more violence. Like you have to be more violent than the gang. I mean, satellite images coming out of CCOT are not good. I mean, there's pools of blood in the courtyard and bodies. Like they're not good. It's been cited as one of the most oppressive and dangerous prison systems, definitely the most overcrowded prison system in the world. And that's why that hot mic moment, you have Trump saying, it's not big enough. It's not big enough. You got to build 5 more. They don't have enough room. What Bukele discovered when people were lauding his sort of accomplishments with the prisoners is that he figured out that he could sell these prison spots to other countries. So the prison spots in CCOT, another reason why it's so overcrowded is because the prison spots are for sale. They're rented out to other countries.
Are you serious?
Yes. He has to pay, and then he gets paid. And this model had Eric Prince like, cha-ching. If he's doing that as a state, I can privatize this inside his state.
Wait. Are you telling me that he is selling?
Yeah, he's
That's so
literally
illegal. I was about to say that's so illegal, but that's a different country.
Yeah,
he is selling prison spots to other countries. So let's say in Guatemala,
if they're like, I have an incredibly hardened criminal that I want to make an example of, send him to CCOT, and he'll disappear. I think it was 20,000 a month or something like that. 20,000. I knew the 20,000 figure was in there. I don't remember if it was a month or a year. It's not legal. No, for us, it's not legal. But I mean, we don't have to follow international law.
But I mean, under normal circumstances, states.
Well, we just talked about norms. The norms don't matter. They've been
fair enough. Okay, fair enough. Under law, I mean, because the judge has been knocking down a lot of stuff that Donald Trump has been doing. The Supreme Court even got involved and said, hey, bring him back.
Well, I mean, we're paying for these spots yet, but it's a system that Bukele has come up with that other countries have utilized. This guy, something more stuff is going to come out about the guy that you're talking about. Something is really fishy with this situation. The one that you mentioned, the American, there's more that's going to come out about this.
That is so weird. That guy, man, because it put me in mind of Guantanamo Bay.
It is the new Gitmo. So they really want to phase away from using Gitmo. They really don't want to use Gitmo for deportees or anybody like these. Sorry, my puppy is playing with a toy. It's better for her to just have it than to bother me. They don't want to use it for the political dissidents. That's a bad look. Gitmo has a stigma, rightfully so. Yeah. And just Gitmo is very terrifying just to say, to most Americans. So they don't want to say we're sending the deportees to Gitmo. We're sending the political dissident students to Gitmo. Well, that's like they're not terrorists. So instead, they're going to send them to BlackRock prisons on American soil down in El Salvador. It doesn't count as deportation because they'll be shipping them to American soil. That's the loophole they're trying to exploit.
But that's not American soil. That's on a whole different.
It will be. It's called a treaty of cessions. When you do engage in a treaty of cessions as a sovereign country, you can cede pieces of your territory to another state for either extended periods of time or forever, which is what Honduras has done for us with the base. El Salvador is doing it for the prisons. Yeah, and Ecuador is doing it for their own naval base to give it to
Are
us.
you serious?
Yes, look it up.
That is what
Look
they're
a little
doing.
bit about it. It's called the Treaty of Sessions, Cessions, Sessions, and it is from Eric Prince came up with the proposal. It's something that I wrote about lightly. I didn't go really into depth, but it's something that, yeah, it's called a Treaty of Sessions, and they will cede. They've even said you can cede parts of the prison to us, and we'll just take over those certain parts. That's how it's crazy.
Oh, that's terrifying.
I don't know what else.
That's legitimately terrifying.
I don't know what else to do.
Have you ever watched Locked Up Abroad?
Yes. It'll be me, you. It'll be me and you and the other dissidents. Like, how did we get here, guys? Record scratch. I bet you're wondering how we got here.
That show freaks me out like nobody's business.
I'm serious.
That is terrifying.
Mhm.
Because it's creating a legal loophole in order to
That was the
effectively
point.
drop
Addressed-
Americans.
They addressed it
into-
a little bit. Caroline Levitt addressed it. Somebody asked her, "Are you looking into deporting Americans down to El Salvador, to wherever?" And she said, "We're looking into the constitutional stuff, and we're looking into how we can get around that." And that's exactly what she said. And I can't remember the congressman's name. Forgive me, but he said, "I fully support it." They said, "Do you support shipping American citizens down there?" And he said, "Yes. Send our violent criminals down there." So these people support it.
What is wrong with our own prisons?
They're overcrowded and they have to fight fires. We need people in El Salvador to fight the gangs and make lingerie. Also, don't forget that, that El Salvador is being positioned to be this sort of crypto Dubai. It's the new Dubai for crypto lords. That's why Peter Thiel is so heavily invested into El Salvador. El Salvador is going to become a tax haven for large Bitcoin and large crypto holders. David Sachs, Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Donald Trump, who now holds billions in crypto because of his own rug pull. Milei is involved. So they're calling it Bitcoin City. And guess who will be your indentured servants? The prisoners.
Sarah, this is terrifying.
I
This is a
know,
terrifying
you can't do
story.
anything but laugh because it's so surreal. You're just like, but yes, look it up. Even Google recently moved down there. They're begging people to come to, they want to hire a lot of people. They're doing all of the cloud services for El Salvador and its prisons.
And so it's going to become the prison system of the world, effectively.
world.
You know, hey, you have a prisoner that you don't want to deal with, drop them in El Salvador, where there'll be a patch of land for them. Hell, we don't even need a whole patch of land. We'll give you just a cell, and we'll see that cell to you in your country.
You can
that you
rent
can drop
it.
the guy in.
Yep.
That's terrifying. I think this is the most terrifying story of all the stories I covered today. And I'm talking about people being shot in the face.
That's why it's my
killings.
favorite one.
Yeah, this is terrifying for some reason. It's a Black Mirror episode. That's what it puts me in mind of. Flying drones, flying killer robots, defense shields.
Yep.
Because gangs have drones of their own, and eventually gonna have gang wars with drones.
Yeah, literally. I mean, there's people that the United States says, "Oh, that's a state," but the international community doesn't recognize it as a state, or the people that United States works with that are actually non-state actors, that they're like, "Oh, this is a legitimate army," and the rest of the world's like, "No, they're not," and then they're giving them these sorts of weapons. It's terrifying. I mean, I use the Sahel because things can get extremely hairy in the Sahel, and the people we support in the Sahel are the terrorists. But we say that they're the rightful government or that they're the military. So we're just going to give straight up terrorists a weapons defense system? That's psychotic.
Well, we hate the fact that, I always mess his name up, Traore, I believe.
Oh, Traore, gosh.
Yeah, we hate the fact that he is using the resources of Africa for Africa.
You're not allowed to do that.
Yeah, it's like, hey, dude, what are you doing? What are you doing? Yeah. It's like, well, I'm trying to, get this gold mine. I want to mine gold. I want to make a bank. And I want to, make... No, you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah, he turned down an offer recently. I don't remember what it was, but they wanted to build something. And he said, "Why would I let you build that when we need schools and hospitals? So unless you're going to build the schools and hospitals, we don't want anything to do with it." And the deal didn't go through.
He's been building roads.
Mhm.
Like, one of the mind-blowing stats for me is that of all of those, let's say like 50 years, they've had, let's say like a few kilometers of road over the entire span of like 20, 50 years. And he's built more in the course of the time that he's taken over government. Like he has really been motivated to what is in the best interest of my country, full stop.
Mm-hmm.
God bless him.
He's been in the news lately. I think something's going on with him positively. I don't remember what it was though. But yeah. The unification of the states in the Sahel is a good thing. They're called the Young Lions because you got to give it some mystique, but they're doing really amazing things, and they need to be left alone. That's what they need.
We're not going to do that. They're going to need some freedom. Yeah,
they got to be freed from the oppression of Ibrahim Traore.
Yeah, it's outrageous. Sarah, thank you for this. You've
sorry for giving you
scared the shit out of me in this interview. It's something about this that weirds me out to no end. I think what it is, Mark Sloboda had this argument about the need for Leviathan. And his point was, for all of the ills of a state, you require a state. Yeah. Otherwise, you're vulnerable to any other aggressor because the state is ultimately a protector, not to mention taking care of.
But that norm is out the window. They're not the protector anymore.
Yeah. I mean, the notion that you get dropped into some hellhole in a foreign country.
It's the notion that they don't owe you anything. The state doesn't owe you protection anymore. That's not something. I know Marcus has the liberty of living in Moscow, where he lives in a state that does their best to protect them. But
sorry, people Mark, in the place for protecting him, right? Yeah,
love you to death, Mark. But in the United States, when you're questioning why don't these social safety nets exist that they have in other countries, it's always the government isn't your nanny.
Yeah,
they don't have to protect us. They're here to protect property, private property, and the state.
Not you, especially if you don't have any private property.
Exactly.
Sarah, you're fantastic.
What a
you
black
scared shit out of me. God, man, you scared the shit out of me. But yeah, you're fantastic. Sarah Bils. She's an independent journalist, U.S. Navy veteran, and co-founder of DD Geopolitics. Check them out on YouTube. Check them out on Twitter. They are awesome. Sarah, thank you for this. I really appreciate it.
Try to have a good weekend, and I'll be here if you guys have nightmares.
I know, right? I know, right? You have a good one. Be safe.
It up.
She is awesome. That is terrifying. That is terrifying. The fires in Israel. I mean, what is there to talk about? There fires in Israel. I mean, I can show you the video if you want, but I didn't, in comparison to the other stories, I didn't think it was all that relevant. God got involved. God got involved. That's the way I see it. I mean, what is it? U.S. Navy veteran. What is the angle on the story? They put in trees that don't belong in the area. Those trees catch on fire, and they blame the Palestinians. And they are fleeing for their lives as the fire effectively takes over everything. Okay, well, God got involved. God got involved. Yeah, fuck Israel. Yeah, that's the way I look at it. God got involved. Alexander G, YouTube is denying any statement that is pro-peace. What is going on? Well, what is the pro-peace statement that you want to make? What is the pro-peace statement that you want to make? I just had Johnny Miller on here. He is fundamentally pro-peace in a way that I respect. Yeah, I respect the shit out of it. I agree with his statement. Johnny is affected by the Moscow-centric groupthink that is pro-Trump, not aware of denazification is essential for most Russians. Yes, denazification is impossible and does not require tanks, but obviously a regime change. Laugh 66, it's that. Like, if you notice in the conversation, when I'm like, okay, well, don't you have to get rid of the government? Like, look, there's a fundamental contradiction in Trump's point of view. They seem to only want to freeze the conflict. Okay, well, a frozen conflict can erupt at any particular moment. And if you have the situation like Syria, where it was frozen for several years, and at the most inopportune moment, the thing unfreezes. It is more than that. Is Ukraine going to have a military? How big is that military going to be? Are you going to be able to put weapons in it? Are you going to give it intelligence? Okay, all of that stuff matters. Beyond freezing a conflict, is Europe going to continue to put weapons in? Are they going to continue to support them in the way that they were supporting them? All of that stuff matters. Is the same government going to be in place? You know, the same government that hates Russians, that got rid of opposition political parties, that got rid of opposition media, that is throwing people in jail left and right, that just put sanctions on Arestovich, spin doctor for Zelensky at one point. That government has to go. It has to go. That same government and the people who were part of that coup are now talking about, okay, this is going to be a temporary peace. That's a fail, right? It's a fail on its face. So Miller wants to end the fighting and the war and the killing, which is admirable, which is why I say it's an admirable objective. But you got to get rid of the government that was that effectively the coup government that is in place now, that is doing all of that stuff, and that provoked the war in the first place. If indeed you're trying to have a sustainable peace and you want Ukraine to have some level of self-determination, as opposed to having a bunch of neo-Nazis or Banderites or whatever you want to call them running the government. Lab 66, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. All right, we have come to the end. We have had a great show. Sarah and I think we're all over the place. I have no idea how I'm going to cut that as a video. That sounds like two people just chatting at home. I'll accept it. I enjoy it. I want to thank all of you for joining me. Damn good show today. I want to thank all of my guests. Alex Krainer started us off strong. And in starting us off strong, we effectively stuck with nearly 700 people in the entire show. That is damn good. I want to thank all of you for being here. Like I said, you can be anywhere. I appreciate you being here with me. As usual, very good. There are days, I can be honest, there are days that are rough. I got to be honest, I've been dragging ass this morning. I got a boost of energy somewhere along the show. I did not sleep at all last night. And so I still need to cut videos and everything else. But I appreciate all of you for being here. You give me energy as I go about the show, especially when the people are interesting to talk to. Wasn't placating to rhetoric. DS tanks. Johnny has a better insight. Johnny's insight is good. I just watch the steps. Yeah, that's funny. That's No, Johnny's insight is good. He's a war correspondent. He's there on the ground. And look, man, if you're seeing people shot in the face, your first response is, oh my God, this needs to stop. I agree with him. But how do you stop it is the catch. How do you stop that? I don't have a clear answer for it. And if you notice, he pointed out himself, he talked to soldiers, he talked to politicians, he talked to people in the military. None of them have an answer for it per se. They don't know. They don't know. And I used to ask the same question like a year ago. How do you stop the war? How do you stop? It's one thing to get involved. How do you stop? You have to win. That's how you stop. You stop when you win. And the catch, okay, what does it mean to win? You can say unconditional surrender. You can say you break the Ukrainian military to the point where they finally accept terms, whatever that is. But what Trump is offering, it's not a win and it's not terms. The loser doesn't dictate terms. And they are still under the mindset that this is, that Trump has control in this process. He does not, at least not in the degree that he thinks he does. So, all right, I'm going to end this. I'm going to say like, I'm going to say share. Okay, Nomadic Mariner. The question is, Jamal, are you staying or fleeing? Sometimes I think about fleeing, but I'm too entrenched in my local community nowadays. Well, I mean, contrary to popular belief by many, I love my country. I just don't like the sociopaths that run it. There's a difference in those things. They don't have to be sociopaths. They just so happen to be sociopaths. And the way that they act, the things that they do, the policies that they take. We can be that shining city on the hill. We can be that beacon of, moral authority and whatnot. We just aren't. We're just not. Dishonest, deceitful, break deals that we make, these are not necessarily things that I consider to be positive traits. And I say that as somebody who my value set is from the same country that I'm criticizing. So fleeing, no. Travel, I have no issue with travel. Hell, I have no issue with traveling for a long period of time. But my home is back at home in the States. Fleeing, no. Not at all. All right, guys. You all have a fantastic day. Hopefully I'm not on the list in the way that Sarah says so. I was shocked that Brian Beletic was on the list. And yeah, I had a conversation. So I'm not coming back. He says, fuck that. I'm on the list. They're not going to get me. I put my ass in a cage. They're not doing shit to me. I can't say I blame him, especially when your name starts showing up on, stuff like that. You guys have a fantastic day. Signing off. Jamal Thomas Morning Show, episode 146. I see you guys bright and early. Saturday, Monday morning, providing nothing happens over the weekend. Have a good one, guys.